What if history is not a record of what happened, but only a carefully preserved fragment of something far more complex? Across forgotten valleys, buried cities, and stone monuments carved into silence, archaeologists continue to uncover anomalies that resist explanation. Massive structures built with astonishing precision, artifacts found where they should not exist, and symbols that no known language can fully decode all point to a past still refusing to be understood. Each discovery deepens the uncertainty. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into 3 hours of bizarre ancient archaeological mysteries that continue to baffle scientists. Rising from the arid plains of northern Mesopotamia, the ruins of Tel Brak stretch across the horizon like the ghostly outlines of a city lost to time. Sun-bleached mud brick walls, partially collapsed and half-buried beneath millennia of sediment, hint at the once thriving metropolis that scholars now believe was among the earliest urban centers in human history. From a distance, the site seems silent, almost lifeless, but closer inspection reveals layers upon layers of human ambition, devotion, and ingenuity. Narrow alleyways, the remnants of monumental buildings, and fragmented statues whisper stories that modern eyes can only partially reconstruct. Archaeologists first began systematic excavations here in the 1930s, uncovering evidence that Tel Brak was occupied as early as 6000 BC, long before many of the more famous cities of Mesopotamia rose to prominence. Its strategic position along what would later become major trade routes suggests it was more than just a settlement. It was a hub of commerce, politics, and religious activity. But as researchers peeled back the layers, unexpected mysteries began to emerge. One of the most striking features of Tel Brak is the Eye Temple, named for the hundreds of small, stylized alabaster eye figurines discovered there. Each figure, meticulously carved and arranged in precise rows, seems almost to watch over the city from its silent perch. Scholars debate their exact purpose. Were they votive offerings, symbolic guardians, or remnants of a religious system entirely unfamiliar to us? And why did such a singular artistic motif dominate this site, when other contemporary cities display so little similarity? The answers remain elusive. Excavations have also revealed unusual architectural patterns. Unlike the typical rectangular layouts found in other settlements of the era, Tel Brak exhibits sprawling, irregular city blocks and complex water management systems that defy straightforward interpretation. What drove these choices? Were they purely functional, responding to environmental pressures, or did they reflect social or ceremonial priorities that we cannot fully comprehend today? The artifacts tell stories both familiar and confounding. Clay tablets inscribed with proto-cuneiform suggest an early form of record-keeping and administration, hinting at a sophisticated bureaucracy. Yet alongside these, objects appear that challenge conventional timelines: intricately carved figurines, enigmatic tools, and unusually large structures whose construction techniques are still not fully understood. Could Tel Brak have been a center of innovation, a place where new ideas were tested and refined long before they became widespread? Some researchers propose more speculative ideas. Could the city have played a role in wider networks of cultural or even religious influence, extending far beyond what contemporary settlements could achieve? And what of the sudden declines and abandonments visible in the archaeological record? Are these signs of conflict, environmental change, or events we have yet to imagine? Every layer unearthed seems to generate new questions, each more intricate than the last. Yet perhaps the most haunting aspect of Tel Brak is its silence. For all the artifacts and structures uncovered, we still cannot hear the voices of those who built the city. Their lives, their ambitions, their fears, they remain, largely, a mystery. As the wind sweeps over the broken walls and scattered debris, one can almost sense the pulse of a civilization that flourished and faded, leaving only faint traces of its existence behind. Walking among these ruins today, it is impossible not to wonder. How many stories of human ingenuity, devotion, and resilience remain buried here, waiting to be discovered? What secrets of early urban life have slipped through the cracks of time, leaving only fragments for us to piece together? And as we continue to dig, to analyze, and to question, we are reminded that some mysteries are never fully solved. They invite reflection, curiosity, and a profound respect for the complexities of human history. As the wind carries the faint echoes of ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia, we now turn our attention northward, to a fortress perched on the rocky slopes of modern-day eastern Turkey, Altıntepe. Unlike the sprawling cityscape of Tel Brak, Altıntepe rises sharply from the landscape, its stone walls and towers clinging to the hillside as though resisting the slow erosion of time. From a distance, the site resembles a lone sentinel, overlooking the surrounding plains, its silhouette fractured but unyielding against the sky. Yet, closer examination reveals intricate structures, ceremonial spaces, and artifacts that hint at a society both disciplined and mysterious, one whose story is only partially written in stone. Altıntepe, believed to have been constructed around 1100 BC, sits strategically near trade routes connecting the Anatolian Plateau with Mesopotamia and the broader Near East. Its elevated position suggests both a defensive purpose and a symbolic one, as if the fortress itself was designed to assert authority and to communicate power across the surrounding valleys. Archaeologists have identified massive walls, watchtowers, and gates that speak of a society capable of significant organization and engineering prowess. Every stone laid seems deliberate, every corridor and chamber purposeful, yet the full reasoning behind the fortress's design continues to elude scholars. Excavations at Altıntepe have revealed more than just military architecture. Within the fortified complex lies a series of ritual spaces, temples, shrines, and altars adorned with carvings and inscriptions. One particularly striking discovery is a small circular temple, its walls decorated with depictions of deities whose precise identities remain uncertain. Scholars suggest that these spaces were centers of religious life, where leaders might have performed rituals to secure protection, prosperity, or divine favor. But the exact nature of these ceremonies and the beliefs underpinning them remains shrouded in mystery. Were they influenced by neighboring civilizations, or did they arise from a distinct local tradition now lost to time? Artifacts found at the site add layers of intrigue. Clay tablets, inscribed with what appears to be an early form of cuneiform adapted for local dialects, suggest an administrative function, a way to record trade, resources, or perhaps even legal matters. Pottery, tools, and personal items tell us that Altıntepe was not merely a fortress. It was a living community, home to families, artisans, and priests. Yet alongside these ordinary objects lie unusual finds: ornamental jewelry fashioned from imported materials, and ceremonial objects whose purpose is unclear. Why were these items brought here? What significance did they hold for the people of Altıntepe? Could they indicate wider trade networks, or even influence from distant cultures whose connections we can only speculate upon? The fortress itself presents its own puzzles. Unlike other contemporary strongholds, Altıntepe features a complex system of underground chambers and tunnels. Some were undoubtedly storage spaces, perhaps for grain or weaponry. Others, however, appear to have had ceremonial or symbolic purposes, though the evidence is fragmentary. Why invest so much effort into subterranean construction? Was it purely functional, or did it serve ritualistic needs, hidden from the eyes of outsiders? Archaeologists continue to debate these questions, offering theories yet acknowledging the limits of what can be confidently concluded. The fortress's decline adds another layer to the enigma. Archaeological evidence indicates that Altıntepe was abandoned around 800 BC. Signs of destruction are minimal, and there is little evidence of prolonged conflict. Could this have been a deliberate evacuation, a slow decline due to shifting trade routes or environmental pressures? Or might there have been cultural or political upheavals that remain unrecorded in surviving inscriptions? The abrupt disappearance of activity at such a prominent site leaves room for speculation, but also underscores the gaps in our understanding of the region's history. Some researchers have proposed more speculative interpretations. The alignment of certain walls and ritual spaces with solar and celestial events hints at a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Were these ancient engineers aware of solstices and equinoxes, embedding astronomical knowledge into the fortress's very structure? Could Altıntepe have served not only as a military stronghold, but also as a center of ritualized observation, where the heavens themselves guided human activity? While mainstream archaeology remains cautious, these possibilities invite us to reconsider the fortress not simply as a defensive installation, but as a complex intersection of politics, religion, and knowledge. Walking through the ruins today, it is easy to sense the layers of human intention embedded in every stone. The rhythm of life here, daily chores, ceremonial gatherings, and strategic planning, can be glimpsed in the architectural traces left behind. Yet, for all we can observe, Altıntepe retains an aura of quiet resistance. Its stones do not yield all their secrets readily. Each excavation reveals more questions than answers. Why was this site chosen? How did its inhabitants interact with neighboring regions? And what knowledge, cultural or scientific, might have been lost as the fortress fell silent? Altıntepe reminds us that history is never a straightforward narrative. It is a tapestry woven from fragments, each telling a partial story, each leaving space for interpretation, imagination, and wonder. The fortress stands as a testament to human ingenuity, ambition, and the enduring mysteries that accompany civilizations long vanished. We can map its walls, catalog its artifacts, and even reconstruct aspects of daily life, but the full richness of its story remains just out of reach, suspended in the dust and stones of an ancient world. As the sun dips behind the eastern ridges, casting long shadows across the courtyard and collapsed towers, one cannot help but pause and reflect. How many lives, ambitions, and beliefs remain hidden beneath the surface of Altıntepe? What fragments of history are still buried, waiting to reveal themselves to those patient enough to seek them? And what might these ruins tell us, not only about a fortress on a hill, but about the human desire to leave a mark, to communicate across the centuries, and to touch the eternal through stone and ritual? The answers, it seems, are still waiting to be discovered. As the shadowed valleys of eastern Anatolia give way to the gently rolling plains of central Turkey, the site of Karahöyük emerges quietly from the landscape. From afar, it appears as little more than a low, rounded mound, its earthen contours blending with the surrounding fields. Yet beneath this unassuming exterior lies a layered history spanning millennia, a city that once thrived long before the written records of empires could fully capture its existence. Walking among the subtle rises and depressions, one can almost sense the rhythm of lives long past, the labor of builders, the rituals of the faithful, and the daily pulse of a settlement now almost invisible to the casual observer. Excavations at Karahöyük suggest that it was first inhabited around 4000 BC, during a time when complex societies were beginning to coalesce across Anatolia. Unlike the fortified grandeur of Altıntepe, Karahöyük presents a more organic urban layout, with domestic structures, workshops, and public spaces emerging seemingly in response to the natural contours of the mound itself. Streets, if they can be called that, wind gently among the houses, their walls constructed of mud brick and sun-dried clay, leaving traces of the communities that once animated them. The overall impression is not one of rigid planning, but of human life adapting, experimenting, and evolving in harmony with the environment. One of the first mysteries encountered at Karahöyük concerns the layering of its settlements. Archaeologists have identified multiple occupation phases, each built atop the last, creating a stratigraphy that records thousands of years of human activity. Yet within these layers, artifacts occasionally appear that seem anomalous, objects that, by current understanding, should not exist in this context or time frame. Stylized pottery with unusual designs, tools fashioned in ways not typical of their supposed period, and fragments of ceremonial objects suggest that there may have been exchanges of knowledge, techniques, or even belief systems with cultures far beyond the immediate region. How did such innovations arrive here, and what do they tell us about the networks connecting early Anatolian societies? Karahöyük also offers glimpses into the spiritual and ceremonial life of its inhabitants. Shrines and small temples have been uncovered, some marked by simple altars, and others adorned with intricate carvings. Certain figurines discovered at the site, representing humans or abstract symbolic forms, hint at beliefs that remain largely inaccessible to modern understanding. Scholars debate their function. Were they protective talismans, votive offerings, or perhaps teaching tools used to transmit knowledge across generations? The repetition of specific symbols and motifs suggests a shared system of meaning, yet without textual evidence, we are left to interpret gestures frozen in clay, pondering their intended significance. Another intriguing element of Karahöyük is its apparent role as a center of early metallurgy. Excavations have revealed workshops containing slag, molds, and partially finished metal objects, indicating that the inhabitants were experimenting with copper and bronze technologies at a remarkably early stage. The presence of metal artifacts alongside organic and stone tools raises questions about the speed and reach of technological innovation in this region. Was Karahöyük an independent hub of metallurgical development, or did its artisans participate in broader exchange networks spanning Anatolia and beyond? The evidence remains tantalizingly incomplete, leaving room for further exploration and interpretation. Even the city's layout invites speculation. Certain buildings are unusually large compared to surrounding homes, and some walls are remarkably thick for domestic purposes. Were these spaces communal halls, centers of governance, or ceremonial enclosures? And what of the open courtyards that appear to have been intentionally oriented to capture light or seasonal changes? Could these reflect practical design, or do they hint at a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and ritual timing? The answers remain elusive, hidden in the dust and buried architecture of the mound. The decline and eventual abandonment of Karahöyük is similarly enigmatic. Unlike settlements destroyed in war, there is little evidence of violent conquest. Instead, the archaeological record suggests a gradual shift, perhaps influenced by environmental changes, economic realignment, or social transformation. Why, after centuries of habitation and apparent prosperity, did the site lose its significance? Were the inhabitants drawn to emerging urban centers elsewhere, or did cultural practices evolve in ways that made this particular mound obsolete? Every hypothesis opens new avenues of inquiry, but none can claim certainty. Walking through the excavated areas today, the atmosphere is one of quiet reflection. Each exposed wall, each shard of pottery, and each carved figurine represents a dialogue across time, a message partially obscured by centuries but still resonant. The mound's contours, softened by centuries of erosion, invite the observer to imagine not only the practical lives of its citizens, but also their dreams, their rituals, and their place in a wider network of early human civilization. What can we infer from the choices they made in construction, in art, and in ceremony? What has been lost to decay, and what might future excavations reveal? Karahöyük, like many ancient sites, sits at the intersection of the known and the unknown. It is a testament to human ingenuity, to the desire to create, to communicate, and to endure. And yet, for all its revelations, it keeps its deepest secrets buried beneath layers of soil and memory. As scholars continue to dig, document, and analyze, we are reminded that the story of Karahöyük is not a closed book. It is a puzzle, an invitation to wonder, and a silent challenge to our understanding of early human civilization. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Karahöyük is the questions it leaves unanswered. How extensive were its trade and cultural connections? What were the beliefs and practices that guided daily life here? And what fragments of knowledge, buried beneath centuries of sediment, might one day transform our understanding of the ancient world? The mound endures, patient and enigmatic, offering glimpses into a civilization that flourished and faded, leaving behind traces that continue to inspire curiosity and reflection. From the gently rolling hills of central Anatolia, the site of Aşıklı rises subtly from the earth, its contours almost imperceptible against the surrounding plains. To the casual observer, it appears as little more than a modest mound, a natural elevation softened by millennia of erosion. Yet beneath this quiet exterior lies one of the earliest known human settlements in the region, a place where the traces of life from over 10,000 years ago still whisper to those patient enough to listen. Walking among its ruins, it is easy to feel the weight of human history pressing down, not as grandeur, but as the intimate, persistent presence of daily life. Aşıklı is remarkable not for its scale, but for its early adoption of permanent settlement patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests occupation dating back to approximately 8,200 BC, during the transition from mobile hunter-gatherer communities to more sedentary lifestyles. Unlike the sprawling urban centers of Karahöyük or the fortified complexity of Altıntepe, Aşıklı presents a quieter, more personal view of early human adaptation. Small, circular dwellings constructed of mud brick and wattle, sometimes set partially below ground, form clusters that speak of cooperative living, social organization, and an emerging understanding of community. These humble structures, carefully maintained and rebuilt over generations, suggest a deep commitment to place and permanence rarely seen in sites of this antiquity. Artifacts unearthed at Aşıklı provide tantalizing glimpses into daily life. Stone tools, axes, blades, and scrapers lie alongside early examples of pottery and ground stone implements, hinting at both practical and artistic endeavors. Yet, within these ordinary objects are anomalies that intrigue researchers. Certain tools exhibit unusual craftsmanship, suggesting techniques developed locally, while others appear to be influenced by materials or styles from distant regions. How did these early settlers acquire knowledge or materials beyond their immediate environment? Were there networks of trade or communication previously unrecognized, or is this evidence of independent innovation arising in isolation? Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of Aşıklı is its evidence of early experimentation with domestication. Animal bones and plant remains suggest that the inhabitants were gradually managing herds of sheep and goats and cultivating cereals, hinting at the very earliest steps toward agriculture. Yet the timing and methods remain enigmatic. How did these people balance foraging with selective cultivation? And what social or cultural factors prompted them to embrace a life increasingly tied to the land? The archaeological record provides clues but not definitive answers, leaving the imagination to fill in the gaps. The settlement also presents evidence of ritualistic or symbolic activity. Certain structures contain hearths and carefully placed artifacts that appear to have no purely utilitarian function. Small figurines, sometimes abstract and other times representing humans or animals, suggest the presence of beliefs, ceremonies, or storytelling practices. Could these items represent early forms of spiritual expression, a way of negotiating human experience with unseen forces? Or were they markers of status, identity, or communal memory? The absence of written records leaves us with only speculation, guided by the silent testimony of clay and stone. Aşıklı's layout itself is intriguing. Unlike later urban centers that display rigid, grid-like organization, the dwellings here appear to follow a natural rhythm, arranged in clusters that suggest social relationships and functional zoning. Pathways wind organically between houses, perhaps following water sources, topography, or cultural conventions now lost to history. Why did the inhabitants choose this particular site? Was it proximity to arable land, access to obsidian and other raw materials, or strategic advantage? And how did these choices shape the development of community life across generations? Equally mysterious is the evidence of continuity and abandonment. Some dwellings show signs of long-term occupation, with multiple layers of rebuilding and repair, while others appear to have been used briefly and then abandoned. What caused these fluctuations? Environmental pressures, resource scarcity, or social dynamics could each have played a role, but no single explanation suffices. The settlement's history seems punctuated by adaptation, resilience, and occasionally, abrupt change, a mirror of the broader story of human experimentation with permanent habitation. Aşıklı also challenges assumptions about the origins of technological and social complexity. Early evidence of communal storage, organized workspaces, and specialized tools suggests that these people were not simply surviving, they were innovating, experimenting with new forms of social and material organization long before the rise of cities and states elsewhere. Could this site represent a key stage in the development of early civilization, one that has been overlooked because of its modest scale? And if so, what other hidden settlements of comparable significance might lie undiscovered across Anatolia and beyond? As one walks among the low, earthen mounds today, the sense of continuity is palpable. The wind whispers across the remains of hearths and doorways, carrying faint echoes of children playing, artisans shaping tools, and families gathering to share meals and stories. Each fragment, stone, bone, or pottery shard, speaks to resilience, creativity, and the human desire to anchor life in place. And yet, despite centuries of excavation, so much remains unknown. The enduring enigma of Aşıklı invites reflection. How did its inhabitants conceive of community, ritual, and innovation? What knowledge did they possess that has been lost to time? And how might these small acts of early human ingenuity have influenced the wider sweep of history, leading eventually to the great cities and fortresses we have already explored in this journey? The mound endures, quietly holding its secrets, a testament to the subtle complexity of our earliest experiments with civilization, and a reminder that the story of humanity is far richer and far stranger than we can fully comprehend. As the arid winds of northern Peru sweep across the Moche Valley, the Huaca de la Luna rises sharply from the desert floor, its massive adobe walls glowing ochre in the harsh sunlight. Unlike the humble, earthen mounds of Anatolia, this pyramid-like structure conveys an immediate sense of scale, authority, and ritual significance. Its terraces, walls, and stepped platforms dominate the landscape, each layer carefully constructed to communicate power and devotion. Yet, for all its grandeur, Huaca de la Luna is more than an architectural achievement. It is a silent chronicle of a civilization whose spiritual and social life remains only partially understood. The Huaca de la Luna was built by the Moche civilization, flourishing between 100 AD and 800 AD, during a period when the northern coast of Peru was a center of innovation and artistic expression. While much of Moche society is revealed through ceramics, metalwork, and textiles, the Huaca de la Luna provides a rare and direct window into their ceremonial and religious practices. Its walls are adorned with intricate friezes and painted murals depicting deities, ritual scenes, and mythological narratives. Yet even with these vivid depictions, many questions remain. Who exactly were the figures represented? What ceremonies were performed, and what meaning did they hold for participants? And why did this site command such monumental effort across generations? Excavations have revealed that Huaca de la Luna was not a single static structure. Instead, it was built in successive phases, each one rising atop the previous, creating a layered chronicle of construction, destruction, and renewal. Some walls show evidence of deliberate dismantling, followed by reconstruction, suggesting complex ritual cycles in which older structures were intentionally replaced. Archaeologists have identified signs of offerings, ceremonial deposits, and even human remains within these layers. These findings hint at practices of sacrifice, possibly intended to appease gods, ensure fertility, or reinforce political authority. Yet the specifics remain elusive, leaving room for interpretation and speculation. One of the most striking mysteries of Huaca de la Luna is its scale and precision. The adobe bricks, often standardized in size and marked with molds, reflect an extraordinary level of planning and labor organization. How did the Moche achieve such consistency without modern tools? And what social structures enabled them to mobilize the workforce required to construct a complex that could reach heights of over 40 meters? The answers lie partially in the material evidence, but much of the societal reasoning behind these achievements is lost to time. The murals themselves add layers of intrigue. Scenes depicting warriors, priests, and supernatural beings suggest a society deeply concerned with the interplay of power, ritual, and the cosmos. The repeated motifs of the decapitator god, figures holding sacrificial knives, and victims in ritualized positions indicate practices that are simultaneously ceremonial, political, and symbolic. But why emphasize these images so prominently? Were they intended as cautionary displays of power, as devotional expressions, or as complex mythological storytelling? The paintings are preserved in vivid detail, yet their full significance remains tantalizingly out of reach. Burials and human remains found within and around the Huaca provide further insight, but also more questions. Many individuals show evidence of ritual sacrifice, with precise patterns in the placement of bodies and accompanying artifacts. The choice of victims, often young men, raises difficult questions about the society's social and religious organization. Were these sacrifices central to maintaining political order, a way of negotiating divine favor, or an expression of communal ideology? And how did ordinary citizens experience or interpret these ceremonies? The physical evidence offers a glimpse, but not a definitive understanding. The surrounding landscape adds to the mystery. Huaca de la Luna is closely connected to the nearby Huaca del Sol, a larger and more monumental site that served complementary political and religious functions. Together, these structures dominate the valley, suggesting a dual system of authority, ritual and administrative, designed to control both the spiritual and secular lives of the Moche population. Yet even the relationship between these two sites is only partially understood. Why were these functions separated? How did the inhabitants navigate between sacred and civic spaces, and what ceremonies blurred the lines between them? Some scholars propose that Huaca de la Luna served as a microcosm of Moche cosmology, a deliberate representation of the universe in architectural form. The terraces may correspond to spiritual planes, the murals to mythological narratives, and the sacrificial practices to cycles of life, death, and renewal. If true, the site represents not only religious devotion, but also a sophisticated conceptualization of human existence and its place in the cosmos. Yet, without textual records, these interpretations remain informed conjectures rather than certainties. Walking through the terraces and corridors today, one can sense both human intention and enduring enigma. The adobe walls, warm to the touch and scarred by centuries of wind and sun, communicate effort, devotion, and memory. The murals, partially restored, retain the vibrancy of their original intent, yet whisper secrets we cannot fully decipher. Each artifact, each brick, and each painted figure speaks of lives lived in devotion, fear, and hope, and yet the full story remains just out of reach. The mystery of Huaca de la Luna persists not only in what it reveals, but also in what it conceals. How did the Moche conceptualize their world? What inspired the repeated cycles of construction, destruction, and ritual deposition? And what other knowledge, now buried beneath layers of adobe and sand, might future generations uncover? The site endures, monumental and silent, an invitation to reflect on human ambition, creativity, and the persistent enigma of societies long gone. As the sun casts long shadows across its terraces, one is left to wonder, what remains hidden, waiting to illuminate the Moche worldview and perhaps the universal human desire to touch the divine through stone, ritual, and art. As the hills of central Turkey rise gently from the Anatolian plain, one mound in particular commands quiet attention: Midas Mound, or Yazilikaya, a monumental tumulus that has survived thousands of years as both a landmark and a puzzle. From a distance, it appears deceptively simple: a rounded hill, crowned with the remains of stone masonry, blending almost seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Yet, for those who approach, the mound reveals traces of human ambition and ritual sophistication that hint at the complex civilization that once called it home. It is a place where legend and archaeology intertwine, leaving an enduring sense of wonder. Midas Mound is attributed to the Phrygians, a people who flourished in Anatolia during the first millennium BC. Archaeological evidence suggests that the mound was constructed around 740 BC, a period marked by political consolidation and the emergence of powerful regional elites. Unlike the sprawling ceremonial complexes of Huaca de la Luna or the domestic settlements of Aşıklı, this site conveys authority through its sheer scale and geometric precision. The mound is composed of carefully arranged earth and rubble, encircled by a ring of megalithic stones, and originally topped by a burial chamber, likely intended for an elite ruler. Walking around its circumference, one senses the deliberate effort to create a monument that would endure both physically and symbolically. Excavations have revealed that Midas Mound is far more than a burial site. It is a repository of ritual, artistry, and mystery. Inscriptions in the Phrygian script, some of the earliest examples of this writing system, are etched into the stone walls and surrounding stelae. Yet these inscriptions remain only partially deciphered. Were they commemorative texts, religious dedications, or political proclamations? And what can they tell us about the social hierarchy, spiritual beliefs, and cultural connections of the Phrygian people? Despite significant scholarly work, the answers remain tantalizingly incomplete, leaving the mound shrouded in intrigue. One of the most compelling enigmas of Midas Mound is its connection to metallurgy and wealth. Historical accounts suggest that the region around the mound was rich in metals, and some legends, most famously associated with King Midas, hint at a society deeply attuned to both earthly riches and symbolic power. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of elaborate metalwork, ceramic artifacts, and evidence of specialized craftsmanship within the mound and its environs. Could these indicate not only a concentration of material wealth, but also the presence of ritualized economic practices? And how did such resources influence the construction, use, and enduring significance of the mound? The structure itself is an architectural marvel. The tumulus was carefully engineered to maintain its form over centuries, a testament to Phrygian knowledge of materials, geometry, and labor organization. Stones are positioned with precision, and the internal chambers display a careful understanding of space and durability. Yet questions abound. How were the stones quarried, transported, and placed with such accuracy? What social structures and rituals governed the labor and expertise required for such an undertaking? Each stone seems to pose as many questions as it answers. The surrounding landscape adds layers of context and mystery. Midas Mound is situated near the ancient Phrygian city of Gordion, a site equally rich with monumental architecture, fortifications, and symbolic carvings. Together, these sites suggest a complex interplay of political, religious, and economic forces shaping the region. Yet the relationship between the mound and its urban counterparts remains partly conjectural. Was Midas Mound primarily a funerary monument, a ceremonial focal point, or both? And how did its presence influence the social and political life of the surrounding population over generations? Intriguingly, several aspects of the mound hint at connections with broader Anatolian and Mediterranean cultural currents. The geometric motifs carved on stone, the burial rituals, and even some of the grave goods suggest influences extending beyond Phrygian borders, implying interaction with neighboring civilizations. Did these exchanges shape local traditions, or did the Phrygians independently develop these complex practices? And could the mound itself have served as a regional symbol, projecting authority and divine favor to distant observers? Walking along the terraces and around the stone ring today, one is struck by the deliberate interplay of natural form and human design. The tumulus rises smoothly from the surrounding plains, yet every stone, every contour, seems to have been placed with intention, as if the mound itself were a language, silently communicating power, devotion, and memory. The wind sweeps across its surface, carrying a faint echo of centuries past, the footsteps of laborers, the chants of priests, the rituals performed to honor leaders and gods alike. Perhaps the most enigmatic aspect of Midas Mound is what remains hidden beneath its layers. Although excavations have uncovered chambers, artifacts, and inscriptions, the full extent of the mound's original form and function is uncertain. What secrets still lie buried, waiting to shed light on Phrygian cosmology, society, and artistic expression? And how much of the human story embedded in this monumental structure will remain inaccessible, cloaked in soil and centuries of silence? Midas Mound endures, monumental yet patient, a testament to human ambition and the desire to leave a mark upon the world. It is both a physical landmark and a puzzle, a reminder that even within the well-studied landscapes of our world, mysteries persist. What inspired its construction? What knowledge and ritual practices were encoded into its stones? And what might future exploration reveal about a civilization that, though distant in time, sought to communicate across the centuries through architecture, artistry, and ceremony? As the sun sets over the Anatolian plain, the mound casts long shadows, inviting reflection, wonder, and a lingering sense that some mysteries are meant to endure. Rising abruptly from the windswept hills of County Sligo, Ireland, the Cairn of Knocknarea dominates the skyline with a silent, imposing presence. From a distance, it appears deceptively simple, a massive mound of earth and stone sitting atop the summit of the hill as though deliberately placed to mark the boundary between the earth and sky. Yet, as one approaches, the enormity of the cairn becomes undeniable, its contours steep and irregular, whispering stories of human ambition, ritual, and mystery that have persisted for thousands of years. Standing at its base, it is almost impossible not to sense the weight of time pressing down from the summit. Archaeological studies suggest that the cairn dates to the Neolithic period, approximately 3200 BC, making it contemporaneous with some of the earliest monumental tombs in Europe. It is believed to be the final resting place of an important individual, perhaps a local chieftain or priestess, yet the true identity of the person, or persons, interred within remains unknown. Unlike the grand ceremonial complexes of the Monte or the precision-engineered tumuli of the Phrygians, Knocknarea is a singular, solitary mound, commanding attention not through architectural refinement, but through sheer scale and placement. Its elevated position, overlooking the surrounding landscape, suggests that it was meant to be seen from afar, a beacon, a monument, and perhaps a symbol of power or reverence. Excavations have been limited, and for good reason. The cairn's massive construction and its status as a protected monument have restricted intrusive study, leaving much of its interior unexplored. Nevertheless, geophysical surveys indicate the presence of a central burial chamber, aligned roughly along the axis of the summit. What prompted the Neolithic builders to select this particular hilltop? Was it chosen for its prominence, for astronomical alignment, or for some symbolic connection to the natural landscape? The answers remain elusive, hidden beneath the stones that have weathered millennia. The cairn's construction itself raises questions about the organization and technological skill of its builders. Tens of thousands of stones were moved and carefully arranged without the benefit of modern tools or machinery. How was this achieved? How many individuals were involved, and what social structures enabled them to coordinate such a monumental effort? The cairn stands as a testament to both communal dedication and the human capacity to transform the landscape to serve symbolic purposes. Legends and folklore have long surrounded Knocknarea, adding layers of intrigue to its archaeological significance. Irish mythology often associates the mound with Queen Maeve, a powerful figure in the Ulster cycle of stories. Though there is no evidence that Maeve, or any historical figure of her stature, was buried here, the enduring connection between myth and mound hints at a cultural memory that may have preserved fragments of its significance across millennia. Could these legends encode truths about the cairn's original purpose, or do they simply reflect the human desire to connect monumental structures with narrative and identity? The surrounding landscape only deepens the mystery. From the summit, one can see a patchwork of hills, rivers, and smaller cairns dotting the terrain, suggesting that Knocknarea may have been part of a wider ceremonial or territorial network. Were these other mounds contemporaneous, and did they function in concert with Knocknarea as markers of social or spiritual boundaries? Or were they constructed for entirely separate purposes, later integrated into a complex landscape of ritual significance? The cairn's prominence implies an intentional relationship with its environment, yet the nature of that relationship remains speculative. Artifacts discovered in the vicinity, including pottery fragments and flint tools, indicate a community capable of both practical ingenuity and artistic expression. Yet the most enigmatic aspect remains the lack of more extensive burial goods or inscriptions. Unlike other Neolithic sites, where offerings, jewelry, or symbolic objects are abundant, Knocknarea appears deliberately sparse. Was this an intentional cultural choice, reflecting beliefs about the afterlife, status, or sacredness? Or have perishable materials, lost to time, once occupied the interior of the mound? The absence of definitive evidence invites both caution and wonder, highlighting the limits of archaeological interpretation. The cairn's orientation and relationship to natural and celestial features suggest another layer of complexity. Some researchers have speculated that the mound may have been aligned with solar or lunar events, echoing a broader Neolithic fascination with astronomy. Could Knocknarea have served as both tomb and observatory, linking the earthly and the celestial? And if so, what knowledge guided its construction, and how was it preserved within a largely oral society? These questions linger, unanswered, yet the site itself seems to encourage reflection on the intersection of human ingenuity, spirituality, and the cosmos. Walking along the crest of Knocknarea today, the cairn's scale and isolation inspire both awe and contemplation. The wind sweeps across the summit, carrying the faint scent of heather and earth, as if bridging the present with the distant past. Each stone, weathered and moss-covered, seems to hold traces of human hands, of labor, of intention. And yet, despite its visibility and prominence, The cairn keeps its secrets well, revealing only what time and circumstance allow. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Knocknarea is not what it is, but what it conceals. What stories, rituals, or knowledge are entombed within its stones, waiting for patient observers to uncover? What might the cairn tell us about Neolithic society, their beliefs, and their understanding of life, death, and the natural world? And how many other monumental structures, equally enigmatic, remain scattered across the landscape, their meanings lost to history, yet calling to the curious? The Cairn of Knocknarea endures, a solitary sentinel over the hills of Sligo, monumental yet intimate, silent yet profoundly expressive. It reminds us that even in places where the earth appears calm and timeless, human presence and intention have left indelible marks. The mound stands as a bridge between past and present, inviting reflection, imagination, and wonder. And as the sun dips behind the western hills, casting long shadows across its ancient stones, one cannot help but wonder, what truths remain hidden beneath its surface, waiting for the moment when they might finally speak? From the sun-scorched sands of Middle Egypt, a whisper of history emerges in the form of a long-forgotten tomb. Buried beneath layers of time and the encroaching desert, the resting place of Pharaoh Senebkay was unearthed in Abydos, an ancient necropolis that has captivated archaeologists for centuries. At first glance, the tomb seems modest, unassuming compared with the sprawling pyramids of the Nile Valley. Yet within its walls lie clues that challenge conventional understandings of the Second Intermediate Period, hinting at a kingdom that history nearly erased. Approaching the site, one feels the stillness of centuries, the hush of a secret long kept. Senebkay ruled during the mid-Second Intermediate Period, around 1650 to 1600 BC, a turbulent era when Egypt was fragmented into competing dynasties. Unlike the well-documented pharaohs of the New Kingdom, his reign is obscured, and his tomb lay undiscovered until a team of archaeologists began careful excavations in the early 21st century. The tomb's modest size and seemingly plain construction initially suggested it belonged to a minor official. But as the excavation progressed, the evidence spoke differently. A royal burial, adorned with the necessary insignia of kingship, yet intentionally concealed beneath centuries of accumulated sand and rubble. Why had this pharaoh's final resting place been lost to time, even while others were immortalized through monumental pyramids? The tomb itself is a marvel of practical and symbolic design. It consists of a series of corridors leading to a central burial chamber, the walls of which bear traces of decoration, faded hieroglyphs, carved reliefs, and faint depictions of ritual scenes. The design reflects both continuity with older traditions and adaptation to the uncertain political climate of the era. Scholars have noted that certain elements of the tomb's construction suggest rapid planning, perhaps to protect the king's remains during a period of instability. Was this an emergency burial, or a deliberate choice to obscure the tomb from rivals and looters? And what does this tell us about the threats and dynamics of Senebkay's reign? Inside, the burial chamber holds additional enigmas. The sarcophagus itself is relatively simple, yet the human remains within reveal a ruler who experienced a life of conflict. Analysis indicates that Senebkay likely sustained multiple battle injuries, including a fatal blow to the head. Could these wounds be the record of the internecine warfare of his time, evidence of clashes with rival dynasties vying for control over Upper and Lower Egypt? Or might they hint at a more personal, politically motivated assassination? The tomb, in its silence, invites these questions while offering only tantalizing fragments of the answers. Artifacts within the tomb provide further insight into a forgotten world. Ceremonial objects, fragments of ritual pottery, and traces of gilded decoration suggest the persistence of royal customs, even in a period of upheaval. Yet the paucity of elaborate grave goods, compared to contemporaneous New Kingdom burials underscores the precarious nature of the era. Did this scarcity reflect material constraints, political insecurity, or a cultural shift in burial practices? And what other treasures, if any, may have been plundered or lost over the millennia, leaving the tomb incomplete but no less compelling? The very location of Senebkay's tomb adds another layer to its mystery. Abydos was a sacred site, home to the temple of Osiris and a center of cultic devotion. Interring a king here might have been an assertion of legitimacy, a claim to divine favor, or a statement of continuity with ancestral rulers. Yet the tomb's concealment beneath later construction and natural accumulation suggests that its visibility was deliberately limited. Why would the builders invest in a sacred location while simultaneously hiding the tomb from view? And what does this duality tell us about the balance between political authority, religious symbolism, and survival in a fragmented kingdom? Even more intriguing is the broader context of the Second Intermediate Period. The discovery of Senebkay's tomb has challenged established chronologies, revealing a previously unknown line of local kings in Abydos. These rulers existed in parallel with the Hyksos in the north and other competing dynasties in Upper Egypt. Could Senebkay's reign have represented a fleeting attempt at reunification, or was it a regional assertion of power destined to be eclipsed by larger forces? And how many other rulers from this obscured period remain undiscovered, their tombs hidden beneath layers of sand, stone, and history? As one traces the corridors and chambers today, the quiet grandeur of the tomb is striking. The walls, though partially eroded, still carry the impression of human hands, of artisans laboring to honor a king who lived and died in turbulent times. The sarcophagus, positioned at the heart of the burial chamber, seems almost to radiate a quiet dignity, asserting the presence of Senebkay across centuries of neglect and obscurity. Each fragment, each inscription, each trace of pigment is a dialogue between the past and the present, a silent testament to human ingenuity, ritual, and memory. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the tomb is what remains unknown. What more could the walls reveal if fully excavated? Are there chambers yet to be uncovered, bearing inscriptions or treasures that might illuminate the Second Intermediate Period in ways we cannot currently imagine? And what stories of power, warfare, and devotion lie encoded in the very bones of Senebkay himself, awaiting interpretation by future generations? The Forgotten Tomb of Pharaoh. Senebkay endures, a quiet enigma in the heart of Abydos. It is both a physical site and a symbol of human impermanence and resilience, a reminder that even kings may fade from collective memory, only to be rediscovered by the patient curiosity of archaeologists. As the desert sun arcs across the sky, casting long shadows through the corridors of the tomb, one cannot help but wonder what truths remain hidden beneath the sands, waiting to reveal the life, death, and legacy of a ruler nearly lost to history. As the sands of Abydos slowly give way to the echoes of forgotten kings, we now move back into the heart of ancient Egypt, where another burial site, far more intimate, yet equally compelling, waits beneath the silent weight of time. From the grandeur of royal tombs like that of Senebkay, we step into a different world entirely, one of personal memory, preserved daily life, and an almost haunting sense of presence that defies the distance of millennia. Deep within the Valley of the Kings, carved into the limestone cliffs on the west bank of the Nile, lies the tomb of Ka. Unlike the monumental burial complexes designed for pharaohs, this tomb belongs not to a king, but to a high-ranking royal architect and overseer of works during Egypt's 18th dynasty, around 1400 BC. Yet, what makes the tomb of Ka extraordinary is not its status, but its preservation. It is often described as one of the most intact, non-royal tombs ever discovered in Egypt, offering something rare, a complete snapshot of life, death, and belief frozen in time. When archaeologists first entered the tomb in 1906, they did not step into emptiness or ruin. They stepped into a sealed world. The chamber still held furniture, clothing, food offerings, ceremonial objects, and even personal belongings arranged as if Ka and his wife Merit had only just departed. Beds stood folded and prepared for eternity. Chairs rested against the walls. Boxes filled with linen and carefully labeled scrolls lined the chamber with quiet order. It was not a tomb that felt abandoned. It felt paused. Who was Ka beyond his title? As overseer of royal works under pharaohs Amenhotep II and Thutmose IV, he was responsible for some of the most important architectural projects of his age. Yet in his burial chamber, there is no overwhelming display of royal propaganda or grand political declarations. Instead, there is something far more intimate: the careful arrangement of objects that speak of daily life, family, and continuity beyond death. What does it mean when a civilization prepares not only for eternity, but for familiarity within it? Among the most striking discoveries are the funerary masks, coffins, and canopic equipment belonging to both Ka and his wife Merit. These objects, richly decorated yet deeply personal, reflect the Egyptian belief in the afterlife as a continuation of existence rather than its end. But even here, subtle questions arise. The craftsmanship is exquisite, the materials carefully chosen, yet certain stylistic inconsistencies have led scholars to debate whether all items were created specifically for Ka or repurposed from other contexts. If objects were reused, what does that suggest about status, resources, or funerary urgency during the 18th dynasty? Then there are the papyri, texts carefully preserved within the tomb, including the famous Book of the Dead scroll belonging to Ka. These spells and passages were meant to guide the deceased through the challenges of the afterlife. But even with these texts decoded, the deeper question remains: how were they experienced by those who placed them in the tomb? Were they literal instructions for the soul's journey, or symbolic frameworks designed to give structure to the unknown? The presence of everyday items complicates the picture further. Ka's tomb contained food, wine, clothing, and household tools, objects that suggest an afterlife modeled closely on earthly existence. Yet why such precision in replication? Was the goal comfort, continuity, or protection against the uncertainty of death? And how did individuals like Ka and Merit imagine this continuation of life? Did they envision it as a reflection of their earthly status, or something transformed entirely? Perhaps most intriguing is the emotional tone of the tomb itself. Unlike the more formal and heavily ritualized royal burials, the tomb of Ka feels deeply human. The arrangement of objects suggests care, familiarity, and presence. It is as if those who prepared the burial did not see death as rupture, but as transition. And yet, within this carefully ordered space, there remains a quiet tension, an awareness that despite all preparations, the reality of the afterlife remained unknown. Archaeologists have long noted the exceptional preservation of the tomb's contents, but preservation itself raises questions. Why was this tomb left untouched when so many others in the Valley of the Kings were looted or damaged in antiquity? Was it hidden exceptionally well, or did it escape attention due to shifting political or environmental conditions? And what other tombs, perhaps less fortunate, have been lost entirely, taking their stories with them into silence? There are also broader questions about craftsmanship and production. The objects found within Ka's tomb represent a high level of artisanal skill. Did Ka commission these items specifically for his burial, or were they prepared gradually throughout his life as part of a long-term funerary plan? And if so, what does that tell us about how ancient Egyptians integrated the concept of death into their everyday existence? Some researchers have even suggested that the tomb of Ka may represent a transitional moment in Egyptian funerary culture, a shift toward more personalized burial practices among elite non-royal individuals. But is this interpretation complete? Or are we projecting modern frameworks onto ancient intentions we can no longer fully access? Standing within the conceptual space of the tomb today, one is struck not by absence, but by presence. The objects remain, but the people are gone. Yet their choices, what to bring, what to leave behind, how to arrange the space, continue to speak across time. It is a dialogue without words, preserved in wood, linen, pigment, and stone. And still, questions linger in the silence of the burial chamber. What did Ka and Merit believe they would find beyond death? How much of their preparation reflected certainty, and how much reflected hope? And perhaps most haunting of all, how many other chambers like this once existed, filled with equally intimate traces of lives now completely erased from memory? The tomb of Ka remains, then, not just an archaeological discovery, but a quiet conversation with the past, one that invites us to look deeper into the space between life and eternity, and to wonder what truths still lie sealed beneath the sands, waiting to be found. From the sealed quiet of the Valley of the Kings and the preserved intimacy of the tomb of Ka, our journey now moves far from the deserts of Egypt, carried across the continent to the windswept coast of northwestern Europe. Here, in the Gulf of Morbihan in Brittany, France, lies a place where sea and stone meet in a different kind of silence, one that feels older than memory itself. Rising on the small island of Gavrinis, accessible today only by boat across shifting tides, the Cairn of Gavrinis appears at first as a simple mound of earth and stone. It blends into the island's natural profile so completely that from a distance it could be mistaken for a hill shaped by nature alone. But beneath its surface lies something far more deliberate, a Neolithic passage tomb constructed around 3500 BC, carefully built by a people who left no written record, yet encoded their presence into stone with astonishing precision. The entrance is narrow, almost concealed, leading into a long stone corridor that extends deep into the heart of the cairn. As one steps inside, light fades quickly, replaced by a controlled darkness broken only by the faint illumination filtering from the entrance. The passage is lined with massive slabs of stone, each one carefully placed and covered in intricate carvings, spirals, zigzags, waves, and geometric forms that repeat across the chamber walls like a language that refuses to be translated. What is immediately striking is not just the craftsmanship, but the consistency. These engravings are not random markings. They follow patterns. They echo one another across different stones, as if they were part of a shared symbolic system. Yet no definitive meaning has ever been agreed upon. Are they representations of water, celestial cycles, migration routes, or something more abstract, something rooted in perception rather than language? The stones do not answer. At the end of the passage lies a central chamber, once covered by a corbelled roof that has partially collapsed over millennia. This chamber is believed to have held the remains of an elite individual or individuals, though no intact burial remains have survived. Instead, what remains is the architecture itself, the careful alignment of stones, the deliberate orientation of the passage, and the sense that this was a place designed not only for burial, but for experience, for movement, transition, and perhaps transformation. Archaeologists have long noted the extraordinary effort required to construct Gavrinis. The stones used in its interior were not sourced locally. Many appear to have been transported from distant locations, some potentially over water. How did Neolithic communities, without metal tools or wheeled transport as we understand it, move and position these massive slabs with such accuracy? And more importantly, why? Mainstream interpretations suggest that Gavrinis functioned as a collective burial site, part of a wider network of Neolithic tombs across Brittany and beyond. It is often linked to nearby sites such as Karnac, where rows of standing stones stretch across the landscape in silent formation. Together, these monuments suggest a shared cultural horizon, one in which death, ancestry, and landscape were deeply interconnected. Yet even within this framework, Gavrinis stands apart. Its interior decoration is unusually dense, almost overwhelming in its repetition of motifs. Some researchers have proposed that these engravings may represent a form of proto-writing, or at least a structured symbolic system used to convey meaning across generations. Others argue they reflect a cosmological worldview, one in which spirals and patterns are not symbols of external reality, but expressions of internal or cyclical understanding of time itself. And then there are interpretations that step further away from conventional explanation. Some have suggested that the cairn's alignment, its acoustics, and its enclosed passage may have been designed to create sensory experiences, light, sound, and movement interacting within a controlled sacred environment. Could the carvings have been activated by torchlight, revealing shifting meanings as shadows moved across the stone? Or were they intended to be experienced only under specific conditions, seasonal, ritual, or astronomical, that are now lost to us? Even the island setting raises questions. Today, Gavrinis is surrounded by water, but in the Neolithic period, sea levels were different. The cairn may have once stood in a more connected landscape, part of a broader ceremonial geography now fragmented by rising tides. Was its placement chosen for visibility, isolation, or symbolic separation from the living world? And how did the builders perceive this boundary between land and sea, between permanence and change? Inside the chamber, time feels compressed. The narrow corridor, the enclosing stones, and the repetition of carved patterns create a sense of gradual transition, as if the structure itself was guiding movement from one state of existence to another. Yet what that transition represented remains unknown. Was it purely funerary, or did it reflect a broader belief system in which passage through stone mirrored passage through worlds? The cairn offers no inscriptions to clarify its purpose, no written record to anchor interpretation. Everything must be read from form, from material, from pattern. And yet, despite decades of study, consensus remains incomplete. Each theory explains something, but never everything. Perhaps the most enduring mystery of Gavrinis is not just what it was used for, but what it meant to those who built it. Was it a tomb, a temple, an astronomical marker, or something that defies modern categories entirely? And if its creators intended it to communicate across generations, how much of that message has truly survived the passage of 5,000 years? As one leaves the passage and returns to daylight, the transition is abrupt. The carved stones vanish into shadow behind you, replaced by wind, water, and sky. The cairn resumes its outward simplicity, hiding the complexity within. And yet the questions remain, suspended in the silence of stone. What did the builders of Gavrinis see when they looked at these spirals? What did they understand about time, death, and the landscape that allowed them to shape it so deliberately? And what other meanings, still unrecognized, lie hidden in the patterns, waiting for a language capable of reading them again? From the spiraling stone chambers of Gavrinis and the silent geometry carved into Neolithic stone, our journey now drifts north once more, beyond the coastal mists of Brittany, across the cold Atlantic winds, into the rugged heart of northern Scotland. Here, in the remote landscape of Caithness, where the land is shaped by wind, peat, and time, lies one of the most enigmatic Neolithic monuments in Britain, the Cairn of Camster. At first glance, Camster seems almost unassuming. Low mounds rise gently from the moorland, blending so naturally into the surrounding terrain that they might easily be mistaken for natural hillocks. Heather and grass soften their outlines, and sheep now graze where ancient rituals may once have taken place. Yet beneath this quiet exterior lies a structure of extraordinary complexity. Two chambered cairns, known as the Camster Long and Camster Round, constructed over 5,000 years ago, around 3000 BC. These are not simple burial sites. They are carefully engineered stone architectures, built with a precision that continues to challenge assumptions about Neolithic engineering and intention. And like so many monuments from this distant era, they raise questions that resist simple answers. The Camster Long cairn stretches across the landscape like a sleeping form, its elongated shape marking a communal burial space divided into multiple chambers. Nearby, the Camster Round cairn rises in a more concentrated form, a circular mound encasing a central passage that leads into a single stone-built chamber. Together, they form a paired landscape of memory and ritual, two expressions of the same ancient impulse, yet subtly different in design and experience. The entrances to both cairns are narrow and deliberately low, forcing anyone who enters to bend, to slow down, to transition physically as they move inward. This architectural choice is not accidental. It creates a shift in perception, a passage from open landscape into enclosed darkness, from the world of the living into something else entirely. But what, exactly, was that something else? Inside the chambers, large upright stone slabs form carefully constructed rooms. These spaces were used for burials, but not in the modern sense of individual graves marked for remembrance. Instead, the cairns appear to have functioned as collective burial sites, where remains were placed, rearranged, and possibly revisited over time. This suggests a very different relationship to death, one not of final separation, but of ongoing connection. Yet even this interpretation only partially explains what Camster represents. Archaeologists have noted that the construction of these cairns required immense labor. The stones were not simply gathered nearby. Many were transported from surrounding areas, shaped and carefully fitted without mortar. The precision of the fit suggests planning, coordination, and an understanding of structural stability that challenges simplistic views of Neolithic communities as purely primitive or disorganized. But why invest so much effort into structures that would remain largely hidden beneath earth and turf? One of the most intriguing aspects of Camster is its sense of internal architecture. The chambers are not random cavities. They are arranged with intention, sometimes in branching layouts, sometimes in more linear sequences. In the Camster Long cairn especially, the passage extends deep into the mound before dividing into separate chambers, almost like a small subterranean network. What dictated this design? Was it purely functional, or did it reflect a symbolic mapping of beliefs, ancestry, or cosmology? Mainstream archaeological interpretation suggests that Camster functioned as a communal tomb used by local Neolithic farming communities. It is often placed within a broader tradition of chambered cairn construction across Orkney and mainland Scotland, linked to shifting patterns of settlement, land use, and ritual life. In this view, these cairns represent not isolated mysteries, but part of a wider cultural expression of early farming societies, adapting to and shaping their environment. And yet, even within this framework, unanswered questions remain. For instance, the repeated use and modification of these cairns over long periods suggests that they were not simply burial sites used once and sealed forever. Instead, they may have been active places of ritual engagement, revisited by successive generations. Bones were sometimes moved, rearranged, or placed in different chambers. This raises questions about how the Neolithic people of Caithness understood identity after death. Was the individual preserved in memory, or did they become part of a collective ancestral presence within the cairn itself? Some researchers have proposed that cairns like Camster may have functioned as territorial markers, as well as burial sites. Their visibility in the landscape, despite their subterranean interiors, could have signaled ancestral claims to land, reinforcing social bonds between the living and the dead. But if that is the case, why the emphasis on internal darkness and restricted access? Why design monuments that conceal as much as they reveal? Other interpretations move further into speculative territory, though always cautiously framed within archaeological discourse. The alignment of some Neolithic cairns with solar events has led to suggestions that light and shadow may have played roles in ritual experience. Could Camster's narrow passage have been designed to allow specific light conditions at certain times of year? And if so, what meaning would such moments have held for those who gathered there? Even acoustics have been considered. Some researchers have noted that enclosed stone chambers can produce unusual sound effects, amplification, resonance, and low-frequency vibrations. In a space like Camster, where the boundary between outside and inside is so sharply defined, sound may have played a role in shaping ritual atmosphere. But whether this was intentional or incidental remains unknown. Standing within the cairn today, one experiences a profound shift. The modern world fades quickly as the passage narrows. Light diminishes. Sound becomes muted. The stone walls, cool and close, create a sensation of enclosure that is difficult to fully articulate. It is not difficult to imagine that ancient visitors would have felt a similar transition, not just physical, but psychological. But what meaning did they assign to this sensation? Was it fear, reverence, comfort, or something entirely different? And beyond the technical and ritual questions lies a deeper uncertainty. What did these cairns represent in the worldview of their builders? Were they places where the dead were remembered, where ancestors were actively engaged, or where boundaries between worlds were believed to thin? Without written records, we are left to interpret silence through structure. Even the landscape around Camster contributes to the mystery. The Caithness moorland is vast and open, shaped by wind and weather, with horizons that seem to stretch endlessly. In such a setting, the decision to build enclosed stone chambers beneath earthen mounds feels deliberate, almost symbolic, a contrast between openness and enclosure, exposure and concealment. Was this tension intentional? As centuries passed, the cairns were eventually abandoned, their entrances sealed or forgotten. Earth accumulated over their structures, and their purpose faded from living memory. Yet they remained, silent, intact, waiting. It was only in more recent centuries that they were rediscovered and carefully excavated, revealing their internal chambers once more to the light. And still, even after excavation and study, they do not fully yield their meaning. What remains within Camster that has not yet been understood? Are there layers of symbolism embedded in its architecture that modern frameworks cannot yet decode? And how many other cairns across the Scottish landscape, some still hidden beneath peat and soil, carry similar stories that have yet to be uncovered? As the wind moves across the Caithness hills, brushing over grass and stone, the cairns sit quietly within the landscape, neither fully speaking nor fully silent. They remain suspended between visibility and concealment, between knowledge and mystery. And perhaps the most enduring question is this: were these cairns ever meant to be fully understood in the way we seek to understand them today? Or are they expressions of a worldview where meaning itself was layered, shifting, and partially hidden, like the stones beneath the earth? From the enclosed silence of the Neolithic cairns at Camster, where stone chambers lie buried beneath the windswept moors of Scotland, our journey now shifts once more, this time toward the dry, sun-bleached interior of the Iberian Peninsula. Here, in the heart of western Spain, another monument waits between land and water, between visibility and disappearance. But unlike the hidden passages of Camster, this structure has already shown itself to the world, only to be swallowed again. In the province of Cáceres, within the receding waters of the Valdecañas Reservoir, lies the Dolmen de Guadalperal. At first glance, when the water level drops low enough to reveal it, the sight appears almost surreal, a cluster of upright stones emerging from the cracked bed of an artificial lake, like the remnants of a forgotten gathering frozen in time. Dozens of granite orthostats form a rough oval enclosure, some standing tall and upright, others leaning at strange angles, as if the earth itself had shifted beneath them. And at the center of this arrangement, a long corridor leads toward what was once a burial chamber, now exposed to the open air, alternating between submersion and revelation depending on the cycles of water. It is often called Spain's Stonehenge, though such comparisons only partially capture its character. Dolmen de Guadalperal dates back to approximately 3000 BC, placing it within the broader megalithic traditions of late Neolithic and early Chalcolithic Europe. It was constructed by communities who left no written records, yet who clearly possessed the knowledge and organization required to move and erect massive stones with careful intention. Each slab appears deliberately chosen and placed, forming a structure that was not merely functional, but deeply symbolic. Yet what was its original purpose? Mainstream archaeology identifies Guadalperal as a collective burial site, a place where the dead were laid to rest within a structured environment that connected them to landscape, ancestry, and ritual practice. The corridor leading into the center suggests a passage from the outer world into a protected inner space, possibly representing a symbolic journey from life to death. In this interpretation, the standing stones are not random markers, but deliberate boundaries between realms. And yet, even within this framework, the site resists simple explanation. One of the most striking aspects of Guadalperal is its orientation. The corridor is aligned in a way that suggests intentional positioning, possibly connected to solar cycles or seasonal markers. During certain times of the year, light may have entered the passage in specific ways, illuminating the interior chamber. But if this was deliberate, what was being marked? A moment of transition? A ritual calendar? Or something more abstract? An attempt to bind human memory to celestial movement? The stones themselves carry subtle traces of human modification. Some are shaped, others are left more natural, yet their arrangement suggests a shared language of form. Unlike later monumental architecture, there are no inscriptions, no carvings that clearly identify meaning. And so interpretation becomes an exercise in pattern recognition, intuition, and comparison with other megalithic sites across Europe. But Guadalperal is not isolated. It belongs to a vast network of Neolithic dolmens, passage graves, and stone alignments stretching from Iberia to the British Isles. This raises another question. Were these structures independent cultural developments, or expressions of a wider shared worldview across Neolithic Europe? If ideas could travel without writing, through migration, contact, or oral tradition, then what kinds of knowledge might have spread along these invisible routes? Some researchers have suggested that sites like Guadalperal may encode more than burial practices. The repeated use of circular and linear arrangements, combined with astronomical orientation, has led to theories that these monuments functioned as landscape-scale calendars or ritual maps. In this view, the dolmen is not just a tomb, but a device for understanding time, anchoring human experience to the cycles of sun, moon, and seasons. Others propose more symbolic interpretations. The act of placing stone upon stone, forming enclosed chambers within open landscapes, may reflect a cosmological separation, earth and sky, life and death, known and unknown. But these ideas, while compelling, remain interpretative frameworks rather than confirmed functions. The stones themselves remain silent. What makes Guadalperal particularly haunting is not only its age or construction, but its modern fate. In the 1960s, the construction of the Valdecañas Reservoir submerged the site beneath water, hiding it for decades. It was only during periods of drought that the dolmen reemerged, its stones gradually reappearing as the water receded. In this sense, the monument exists in a state of partial visibility, sometimes present, sometimes absent, always contingent on environmental conditions beyond human control. This cycle of disappearance and reappearance adds another layer to its mystery. What does it mean for a monument to be intermittently visible? Does its meaning shift when submerged, when hidden beneath water, when inaccessible? And how many other archaeological sites lie beneath modern reservoirs, rivers, or landscapes, waiting for temporary conditions to reveal them again? When the dolmen is exposed, the experience of visiting it is strikingly intimate. The stones stand surrounded by cracked earth, as if the landscape itself is holding its breath. Some orthostats bear faint markings, possibly erosion patterns or deliberate shaping, though interpretation is uncertain. The corridor seems to guide the eye inward, toward a center that once held remains, offerings, or ritual objects. But now, there is only emptiness. And yet, emptiness in archaeology is never truly empty. It is a space filled with absence, with implication, with the suggestion of what once was. The surrounding landscape also invites reflection. The dolmen was not built in isolation, but within a lived environment, one that has since been transformed by reservoirs, agriculture, and shifting climate patterns. When originally constructed, it likely stood in a very different setting, perhaps overlooking river valleys or open plains. What did that original landscape look like to its builders? And how did they choose this specific location among many possible sites? Some speculative interpretations extend further, suggesting that the placement of dolmens across Iberia may reflect territorial markers, ancestral pathways, or even shared ceremonial routes spanning generations. Others propose that such monuments could encode social memory, acting as fixed points in a landscape otherwise defined by seasonal movement and oral tradition. But without written records, each interpretation remains provisional. Standing among the stones today, one cannot escape the sense of layered time. The Neolithic builders shaped the monument. Later cultures forgot it. Modern engineers submerged it. And now, climate cycles briefly return it to view. The dolmen becomes not just an artifact of the past, but a participant in an ongoing environmental narrative. What, then, was the intention behind its construction? Was it meant to endure through time, or to function within a specific cultural moment now lost? And if meaning was embedded in its orientation, structure, and material choice, how much of that meaning survives today, waiting for interpretation that may never fully arrive? As the water rises and falls around the site, the Dolmen de Guadalperal continues its quiet existence between two states, hidden and revealed, remembered and forgotten. The stones remain, patient and unchanged, even as the conditions around them shift. And perhaps the most enduring question is this: are we witnessing a monument that has survived intact across 5 millennia, or only fragments of a much larger system of meaning that has been gradually erased by time, water, and human intervention, leaving behind stones that still point toward a story we have not yet learned how to read? As the waters of Spain reluctantly release the Dolmen de Guadalperal, revealing the echoes of a long-forgotten civilization, we shift our gaze to the Mediterranean, where another enigma waits silently in the sun-soaked hills of Sardinia. Here, on the plains near the town of Cabras, the Monte Prama site offers a puzzle both monumental and intimate. A collection of statues so vast and strange that they challenge our understanding of ancient Mediterranean culture. The Monte Prama giants emerge from the dry, wind-swept earth like guardians of a forgotten past. They are not mere statues, but colossal figures carved from local limestone, their bodies upright, rigid, and carefully proportioned. Standing up to 2.5 meters tall, these anthropomorphic forms are both strikingly stylized and surprisingly individualized. The depictions, warriors, archers, boxers, are adorned with detailed armor, shields, and weapons, their expressions frozen in an unyielding, almost timeless vigilance. Some faces are abstract, geometric, and stoic. Others hint at the nuances of human expression. In total, hundreds of fragments suggest that the necropolis once housed dozens, perhaps hundreds, of these figures, forming one of the most remarkable sculptural complexes of the ancient Western Mediterranean. The statues are believed to date back to approximately 1100 to 900 BC, placing them firmly within the Nuragic civilization of Sardinia, a culture renowned for its monumental stone towers, or nuraghi. These enigmatic giants, however, do not fit neatly into conventional categories of Nuragic art. While the Nuragic people are known for their architectural ingenuity, few comparable figurative sculptures exist elsewhere, and the Monte Prama statues appear to transcend the functional or decorative. They are neither merely ceremonial nor purely decorative. They seem to inhabit a space between representation and ritual significance. What purpose could have driven the creation of such imposing figures? Scholars suggest that the statues were commemorative, erected to honor fallen warriors or legendary heroes. This theory is reinforced by their funerary context. The site is, in fact, a necropolis, and the remains of both humans and grave goods were found alongside the figures. But why choose such extraordinary scale and meticulous craftsmanship for this purpose? Why render a community's protectors in stone, larger than life, and place them in alignment with graves? Could these figures have served as guardians of the dead, their silent vigilance bridging the worlds of the living and the deceased? Equally compelling are the technical aspects of the sculptures. Each figure is carved from a single block of limestone, with arms carefully modeled, legs set firmly, and torsos proportioned to convey both strength and solemnity. Some of the warriors carry shields and swords, carefully incised to convey detail. Others bear the fists clenched in combative posture, their torsos twisted as if captured mid-motion. The craftsmanship implies not only skill, but a sophisticated understanding of form and proportion, suggesting workshops or specialized artisans capable of executing such labor-intensive creations. The positioning of the statues within the necropolis further deepens the mystery. They were discovered lying face down, disassembled and broken, suggesting a deliberate act of destruction at some point after their creation. This raises questions about the social and political context of the Nuragic world during the early 1st millennium BC. Were these figures toppled in a conflict, as part of ritual desecration, or simply abandoned and later buried by natural processes? The exact circumstances remain uncertain, leaving room for speculation that hints at upheaval, cultural transition, or ceremonial closure. Adding to the intrigue, some scholars have noted stylistic parallels between Monte Prama and other Mediterranean cultures, including the Mycenaeans and the Phoenicians, suggesting the possibility of cultural exchange. Yet, the statue's geometric abstraction and emphasis on martial symbolism remain uniquely Nuragic, a fusion of external influence and indigenous identity. Could they represent a localized reinterpretation of wider Mediterranean artistic currents? Or do they emerge from an entirely independent conceptual universe, one whose codes of meaning have been lost to time? The Monte Prama giants also raise questions about the scale and organization of Nuragic society. To create, transport, and position such large statues would have required substantial communal effort, suggesting not only technical capability, but complex social structures capable of mobilizing resources over extended periods. If these figures were commemorative, then they also reveal a community deeply invested in memory, lineage, and the symbolic embodiment of honor. But if they served other purposes, ritual, protective, or territorial, their existence hints at beliefs and practices that remain invisible to us today, obscured by the passage of 3 millennia. There are also enigmatic elements in the iconography. The differentiation among warriors, archers, and boxers suggests a codified system of representation, possibly reflecting roles within the society or mythic narratives now lost. Some of the warriors appear unusually slender, others disproportionately broad. Some shields bear incised patterns, possibly symbolic or decorative, yet their precise meaning escapes our understanding. These deliberate choices provoke further questions. Were the statues intended to communicate status, skill, or spiritual significance? And why were their eyes often rendered as mere circles, devoid of pupils or expression, in contrast to the detailed modeling of bodies? Monte Prama's discovery in the late 1970s ignited immediate fascination. Initially, fragments were scattered and misunderstood, mistaken for ordinary megalithic stones. Only careful excavation revealed the sheer scale of the necropolis and the richness of its sculptural program. Today, the site continues to yield fragments, each one an invitation to reconsider what we know about early Mediterranean civilizations. Despite decades of study, the full narrative encoded in these stones remains tantalizingly out of reach, as though the statues themselves were guardians of their own secrets. Speculative theories also abound. Some propose that Monte Prama represents a form of proto-nationalism, a way for neurologic communities to assert identity in the face of external pressures. Others suggest cosmic or ritual functions, with the statues marking celestial alignments or embodying protective forces over the necropolis. Even the act of destruction, once interpreted as iconoclasm, might have ritual significance, a controlled closure rather than mindless violence. Each interpretation illuminates a different possibility, but also reminds us of the immense gulf between modern assumptions and ancient intent. And yet, there is an undeniable power in standing before even a fragment of a Monte Prama giant. The scale, the gesture, the abstracted human form, it all evokes a presence that transcends time. These figures were meant to be seen, to command attention, and perhaps to provoke reflection on human mortality, strength, and memory. Their silence is almost eloquent, urging us to consider how societies remember, honor, and shape their legacies. We are left, as ever, with questions. Why did the Nuragic people choose to immortalize these figures in stone? What stories, myths, or historical events do they encode? How many more statues lie undiscovered, buried under fields, water, or centuries of sediment? And perhaps the most provocative question, if these giants could speak, what would they tell us about a world simultaneously familiar and alien, one that shares our human concerns yet remains fundamentally beyond our grasp? Monte Prama stands, partially reconstructed in museums and partially fragmented in the earth, a testament to the scale of human ambition and the endurance of memory. The necropolis itself, once vibrant with ritual, mourning, and reverence, now exists as a layered archaeological landscape where the living interpret traces of the dead. And in this silence, these colossal figures continue to watch, enigmatic and inscrutable, their gaze fixed across the centuries. Even as modern scholarship attempts to catalog, classify, and contextualize Monte Prama, the giants resist complete understanding. They remind us that the past is never fully recoverable, that monuments carry intentions and meanings sometimes beyond reach, and that history, like stone, endures in ways both permanent and fleeting. And as we contemplate these silent sentinels, we are compelled to wonder, what else remains hidden beneath the Mediterranean sun, waiting to reveal the unexpected, the uncanny, the monumental truths that time has preserved in stone? As the sun sets over Sardinia, casting long shadows across the broken stone forms of the Monte Prama giants, our journey of ancient mysteries carries us westward along the jagged Atlantic coast of Galicia, Spain. Here, perched on rocky promontories that jut defiantly into the sea, lies the Castro de Baroña, a settlement whose very stones whisper of resilience, ingenuity, and unanswered questions. Unlike the monumental sculptures of Sardinia, Castro de Baroña's enigma lies not in grandiose artistic expression, but in the intimate human scale of its construction and the silent testimony of its cliffside location. At first glance, the settlement appears almost cinematic, a cluster of stone roundhouses clinging to granite outcrops, their foundations echoing the curves of the surrounding cliffs. From above, the Atlantic crashes relentlessly against the jagged coastline, the waves sculpting both rock and imagination. The settlement seems to hover between land and sea, a precarious threshold that demands both daring and careful planning from those who once lived here. It is a place where geography itself dictates the rhythms of life, and yet humans have imposed their own order upon it, carving out spaces of habitation, storage, and defense within the contours of the stone. Castro de Baroña is one of the best preserved examples of a castro, a type of fortified settlement that flourished in northwestern Iberia during the Iron Age. Archaeologists estimate the site was occupied between approximately 4th and 2nd century BC, although some evidence suggests earlier habitation. The roundhouses, built from local granite, are small yet meticulously arranged. Their low walls curve inward to form domed interiors, optimized for heat retention and protection from the Atlantic winds. Narrow pathways wind between the dwellings, giving the settlement an organic, almost labyrinthine quality. It is easy to imagine the daily lives of its inhabitants, cooking fires crackling within stone enclosures, children weaving through narrow alleys, and sentries keeping a vigilant eye on the horizon. Yet for all the practicalities, Castro de Baroña harbors mysteries that continue to puzzle historians. Why choose such a perilous location, perched on cliffs where storms and tides could easily overwhelm the settlement? Was it primarily a defensive measure, protecting against rival tribes, pirates, or unknown threats from the sea? Or did its placement hold spiritual significance, a deliberate alignment with celestial events or the rhythms of the ocean? Some scholars have speculated that the settlement may have served as both home and lookout, a liminal space bridging the terrestrial and the maritime, human and natural domains. The artifacts recovered at Castro de Baroña provide tantalizing clues, yet also deepen the questions. Pottery fragments, simple tools, and iron implements suggest a community engaged in agriculture, fishing, and metallurgy, yet the variety and quality of objects indicate trade networks extending far beyond the immediate coastline. Exotic materials such as bronze and decorative items hint at connections with other Iberian tribes, and perhaps even with Mediterranean cultures. How far did the influence of this relatively small settlement extend, and what role did it play in broader cultural and economic networks? The evidence points to a community far more sophisticated than the austere stone walls might initially suggest. Intriguingly, the circular design of the dwellings and the settlement's organization reflect both functional and symbolic concerns. Scholars have noted the uniformity of construction and the repeated architectural motifs across multiple castro sites, raising questions about cultural codification and identity. Was this a reflection of shared spiritual beliefs, social hierarchy, or practical efficiency? And what can these architectural patterns tell us about the lives, rituals, and social cohesion of the castro inhabitants? The answers are elusive, obscured by the erosion of time and the absence of written records. Adding another layer of mystery is the settlement's sudden abandonment. Archaeological evidence suggests that Castro de Baroña was deserted by the 1st century BC, yet no clear cause has been established. Was the site abandoned due to environmental changes, overpopulation, or conflict with external forces? Or did the settlement succumb to a gradual, perhaps even ceremonial decline, leaving the stone houses to weather the Atlantic storms in silence? The absence of violent destruction, coupled with the careful arrangement of the ruins, hints at a departure that may have been orderly rather than chaotic, a conscious decision, the reasons for which remain hidden in the folds of history. The Castro's placement also invites speculation about maritime knowledge and navigation. From the cliff edges, one can see distant coves and estuaries, natural routes that may have been used for fishing, trade, or travel. Did the inhabitants possess an advanced understanding of tides, winds, and seasonal patterns? Could Castro de Baroña have served as a hub for coastal surveillance, guiding the movement of both people and goods along Galicia's rugged shores? While tangible evidence is limited, the strategic positioning of the settlement suggests that its inhabitants were acutely aware of the interplay between land and sea, survival and opportunity. The material culture within Castro de Baroña hints at a society structured by labor, skill, and perhaps hierarchy. The roundhouses contain hearths, storage pits, and stone furniture, suggesting domestic routines infused with careful planning. Yet the labor required to quarry, transport, and assemble granite walls atop cliffside ledges is immense, implying coordination, technical knowledge, and social organization. How were these communities structured? Who commanded the labor, and what mechanisms ensured cooperation and cohesion? The silent stones offer no answers, yet their very existence testifies to human determination and ingenuity. Over the decades, Castro de Baroña has also captured the imagination of those who visit its cliffs. Some theorists propose that the settlement held ritualistic significance, possibly related to water, fertility, or protection from the sea's dangers. The juxtaposition of natural fortification and symbolic architecture raises questions about how prehistoric peoples understood their environment. Did they see the cliffs and the ocean as sacred, as barriers, or as extensions of their living space? Were the roundhouses merely dwellings, or did they also serve as stages for communal rites, storytelling, and memory-keeping? Modern exploration continues to reveal small fragments of the past, but the site retains an aura of ambiguity. The combination of practical construction, strategic location, and possible ritual significance creates a complex tapestry that challenges straightforward interpretation. Castro de Baroña is neither grandiose in the monumental sense, nor fully ordinary. It occupies a liminal space between practicality and enigma, a quiet monument to human resilience and imagination. The settlement's stones speak not only of survival and adaptation, but also of the human desire to leave a trace upon the earth, to assert presence in a harsh and beautiful landscape. Even as archaeologists map the remains and uncover further artifacts, Castro de Baroña resists full comprehension. Its roundhouses, pathways, and walls suggest a coherent plan, yet the motives and beliefs that guided its construction remain speculative. What inspired these ancient builders to cling so tenaciously to the cliffside? How did they perceive the ocean, the sky, and their own mortality? And what social, spiritual, or practical imperatives drove them to shape stone into homes, fortifications, and communal space? Standing at the edge of the cliffs today, one is struck by the sheer audacity of the settlement's location. The Atlantic wind tears across the granite, carrying echoes of voices long silenced, of lives once entwined with stone and sea. Castro de Baroña exists as both a testament to human skill and a riddle of intentions, a place where survival, ritual, and artistry converge. The unanswered questions linger. What truths lie beneath the rubble? What stories remain buried? And what lessons might we glean from a society that balanced precariously between land, sea, and time itself? In the end, Castro de Baroña remains a silent witness to human endeavor, a settlement whose stones, weathered and worn, embody the tension between permanence and impermanence. Each wall, each circular dwelling, each cliffside path invites us to reflect on the ingenuity, resilience, and mysteries of the past. And as we contemplate the site from the wind-swept promontories, we are left to wonder, what else did these ancient inhabitants see, do, and believe that has yet to be revealed? What remains hidden in the folds of stone and memory, waiting for discovery, waiting for interpretation, waiting to speak across the centuries? From the windswept cliffs of Galicia and the Atlantic silence of Castro de Baroña, our journey now turns southward, crossing the sea into North Africa. The landscape changes, but the sense of mystery remains undiminished. Here, in northern Morocco, near the modern town of Asila, lies a monument that stands not in isolation, but in dialogue with questions that stretch far beyond its stones. Surrounded by rolling fields and open sky, the Dolmen de Mzoura rises from the earth as a vast circle of standing stones, an arrangement that immediately commands attention. Unlike many megalithic tombs that hide beneath earthen mounds or inside narrow passages, Mzoura reveals itself openly. Its form is expansive, almost deliberate in its visibility, as if it was never meant to be concealed. Over 100 upright stones once formed a near-perfect ring, some tall and imposing, others weathered and leaning, each one part of a larger geometry whose purpose is still debated. At the center of this circle lies a space that once held a burial, now long emptied or disturbed by time. The monument is believed to date back to the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age, possibly around the 3rd millennium BC, though precise dating remains uncertain due to limited excavation and the complexity of its construction history. What is clear, however, is that the scale of the site implies significant organization, intention, and cultural investment. The first impression of Mzoura is its symmetry. The stones are not scattered randomly across the landscape. They form a deliberate enclosure, a controlled boundary between interior and exterior space. This raises an immediate question. What kind of society constructs a circle of such magnitude purely for burial or ritual purposes? And what meaning did this perfect geometry hold for those who built it? Mainstream archaeological interpretations suggest that the Dolmen de Mzoura functioned as a funerary monument, possibly the burial site of a significant local leader or chieftain. The circular arrangement may symbolize continuity, unity, or cosmic order, reflecting a worldview in which life, death, and nature were interconnected in cyclical form. The central burial space reinforces this interpretation, positioning the deceased at the symbolic heart of the monument, surrounded by a collective architectural expression of remembrance or reverence. Yet even within this framework, uncertainties persist. One of the most intriguing aspects of Mzoura is its sheer scale. Unlike typical dolmens found across the Western Mediterranean, which often involve smaller groups of stones or individual passage tombs, this site extends into a large, open-air structure that resembles a ceremonial arena more than a conventional burial chamber. Why invest such immense labor into creating a monumental circle in a region where simpler burial forms existed? Was this an evolution of megalithic tradition, or a unique cultural expression that has no direct parallel? The construction itself implies coordinated effort over time. Each stone had to be sourced, transported, and positioned with care. Some of the monoliths weigh several tons, suggesting the use of sophisticated techniques, rollers, sledges, leverage systems, or collective human labor organized with precision. But without written records, we are left to reconstruct not only how it was built, but why such effort was considered necessary. The circular layout also invites astronomical speculation. Across many ancient cultures, circular monuments are often associated with celestial observation, tracking the movement of the sun, moon, or stars. Could Mzoura have functioned as a calendrical structure, marking seasonal transitions or ritual events tied to agricultural cycles? If so, what alignments might still be hidden in its geometry, waiting to be measured or rediscovered? Some researchers have noted that megalithic traditions across the Atlantic facade, from Iberia to North Africa, share striking similarities in form and orientation. This has led to broader questions about cultural diffusion versus independent development. Did communities across this region share symbolic systems or cosmological ideas? Or do these similarities emerge independently from universal human responses to landscape, death, and the sky above. Local oral traditions and later historical interpretations add further layers of ambiguity. In some accounts, Mzoura has been associated with legendary figures or ancient dynasties, sometimes attributed to prehistoric kings whose identities blur between myth and history. One such tradition links the site to ancient rulers of North African kingdoms, though archaeological evidence remains inconclusive. These narratives, while not scientifically verified, reflect a persistent human tendency to anchor monumental landscapes in stories of power and origin. And yet, despite its prominence, Mzoura remains relatively understudied compared to other megalithic sites. Limited excavation has left many aspects of the monument untouched. The interior stratigraphy, potential burial layers, and surrounding landscape features may still hold crucial information about its function and chronology. But until more comprehensive studies are undertaken, the site continues to exist in a state of partial knowledge, visible, measurable, but not fully understood. Another compelling question concerns the monument's relationship to its surrounding environment. Today, the dolmen sits within cultivated land, but in antiquity, the landscape would have been different, likely more open, possibly more ritualized. Was the circle intended to be seen from afar, or experienced primarily from within? Did it serve as a boundary marker, a gathering place, or a sacred enclosure accessible only during specific ceremonies? The circular form itself carries symbolic weight across many ancient cultures. It can represent eternity, unity, cycles of time, or the cosmos itself. But symbolism alone does not explain function. Was Mzoura a tomb first and foremost, or did it serve multiple roles: burial site, ritual space, territorial marker, and astronomical instrument simultaneously? Ancient monuments often resist single interpretations, and Mzoura appears no different in this regard. Even the condition of the stones raises questions. Some appear weathered in ways that suggest long exposure, while others show signs of displacement or restoration. Over centuries, the monument has likely undergone multiple phases of alteration: natural erosion, human interference, and perhaps even reuse of materials. Each layer of change complicates attempts to reconstruct its original form. What we see today may be only one moment in a much longer biography of the site. Modern visitors often describe a striking sense of openness when standing within the circle. Unlike enclosed tombs or subterranean chambers, Mzoura exposes its interior space to the sky. This creates a direct connection between earth and atmosphere, between stone and horizon. Was this openness intentional, meant to integrate celestial observation into ritual practice? Or was it simply a practical consequence of architectural choice? The absence of inscriptions deepens the mystery. Without written language, interpretation must rely entirely on form, context, and comparison. Yet even comparative analysis yields limited clarity, as Mzoura does not fit neatly into known typologies of megalithic architecture. It stands somewhat apart, connected to broader traditions, yet distinct enough to resist full classification. Some speculative interpretations suggest that such large circular monuments may have functioned as gathering spaces for seasonal ceremonies involving multiple communities. In this view, the stones would serve as both physical boundary and symbolic center, marking a shared identity across dispersed groups. Others propose more esoteric ideas, ranging from energy alignment theories to lost ritual systems encoded in geometry. While these remain outside mainstream archaeology, their persistence reflects the enduring fascination such monuments inspire. But perhaps the most grounded mystery is also the most profound: the human intention behind the stones. What drove ancient builders to invest so much effort into creating a circle in the landscape? What stories, beliefs, or social structures gave meaning to this arrangement? And how did the people who participated in its construction understand their own relationship to death, memory, and the earth beneath their feet? As the sun moves across the Moroccan sky, casting shifting shadows between the standing stones, the Dolmen de Mzoura becomes less an object and more an experience, an arrangement of space that changes with light, time, and perspective. It is a monument that does not speak directly, yet constantly invites interpretation, and still, it withholds its final answers. What truths remain embedded in the soil beneath its center? What events unfolded here that have left no trace beyond stone and alignment? And how many other circular monuments across the world share this same silence, waiting for meaning that may never fully arrive? The Dolmen de Mzoura stands, then, not as a solved puzzle, but as an open question carved into the landscape, an invitation to look, to wonder, and to accept that some ancient intentions may remain just beyond the reach of modern understanding. From the circular silence of the Dolmen de Mzoura, where stone forms a perfect ring beneath the Moroccan sky, our journey now moves back across the Mediterranean once again, westward, toward an island shaped by wind, salt, and centuries of layered civilization. Here, on the island of Minorca in the Balearic Archipelago, another ancient structure rises from the earth, neither quite temple nor tomb in the way we might expect, but something that seems to blur those distinctions entirely. Standing on a gentle slope overlooking the landscape near Ciutadella, the Naveta des Tudons emerges like a massive stone vessel partially buried in the earth. Its name, Naveta, comes from its resemblance to an upturned ship, and this impression is immediate and unavoidable. Built from enormous limestone blocks carefully stacked without mortar, the structure rises in a stepped, tapering form, its upper edges narrowing as if pointing toward something unseen in the sky. The monument is estimated to date back to around 1000 to 800 BC, belonging to the Talaiolic culture of the Balearic Islands, a Bronze Age society known for its megalithic constructions and enigmatic architectural traditions. At first glance, Naveta des Tudons appears deceptively simple, but as one approaches, its scale becomes overwhelming. The structure is over 14 meters long and nearly 4 meters high, composed of precisely fitted stones that form two internal chambers stacked one above the other. The lower chamber is accessed through a narrow entrance at ground level, while the upper chamber sits above it, separated by a stone slab floor. This dual-level design is unusual in prehistoric architecture, immediately raising questions about its purpose and symbolic meaning. Archaeological excavations conducted in the 20th century revealed human remains inside the structure, along with fragments of pottery, bronze objects, and personal items. These findings strongly suggest a funerary function. The prevailing interpretation is that the Naveta des Tudons served as a collective burial site, used repeatedly over time for the interment of members of the local community. Bones were found disarticulated and rearranged, indicating secondary burial practices, where bodies were initially exposed or processed elsewhere before being placed inside the chamber. Yet even this functional explanation does not fully capture the architectural intention behind the structure. Why design a tomb in the shape of a ship? And why choose a form that so closely resembles a vessel navigating invisible waters? Some scholars suggest the design reflects symbolic beliefs about death as a journey, with the ship representing passage to another realm. In this interpretation, the deceased are not merely buried but transported, crossing an unseen boundary between life and afterlife, guided by cultural beliefs encoded in stone. But the Naveta des Tudons is not a ship that moves. It is anchored firmly to the earth, immovable, permanent. This tension between symbolism and material reality is one of its most compelling features. Was the resemblance to a vessel intentional, or a modern interpretation imposed on an ancient form whose original meaning may have been entirely different? The construction of the Naveta itself reveals remarkable engineering capability. The stones used are massive, some weighing several tons, yet they are carefully shaped and fitted together with precision that suggests advanced knowledge of structural stability. The walls slope inward slightly, creating a corbelled effect that distributes weight evenly and prevents collapse. How did a Bronze Age society develop and refine such techniques without written manuals or formalized architectural systems? Was this knowledge passed down through generations of builders, or concentrated within specialized groups whose skills were carefully guarded? Inside the structure, the two chambers present a stark contrast. The lower chamber is darker, more enclosed, and appears to have been used more intensively for burial deposition. The upper chamber, while structurally similar, may have served a different function, possibly related to ritual preparation, storage of remains, or symbolic separation of stages in the funerary process. Yet the exact relationship between the two spaces remains uncertain. Why divide a burial structure into two distinct levels? What conceptual framework required this separation? The human remains found within the Naveta reveal further complexity. Studies suggest that individuals of different ages and sexes were interred over long periods, indicating repeated use rather than a single event. The practice of secondary burial, collecting bones after initial decomposition, suggests a belief system in which death was not an immediate transition, but a process unfolding over time. But what rituals accompanied this process? And how did the living interpret the gradual transformation of the body into skeletal remains within their cultural worldview? The Naveta des Tudons also raises questions about social organization. The effort required to construct such a structure implies coordinated labor, access to resources, and shared cultural or religious motivations. Was this a communal project undertaken by a single settlement, or did it serve multiple groups across the island? If so, did it function as a central burial site, a territorial marker, or a shared sacred space that transcended local boundaries? Some researchers have pointed out that the Talaiotic culture, which built the Naveta, also constructed other megalithic structures across Minorca, including talaiots and taulas, tower-like and T-shaped monuments whose functions remain partially understood. This broader architectural landscape suggests a complex and highly organized society, yet one whose belief systems remain largely inaccessible to modern interpretation. Was the Naveta part of a larger ceremonial network connecting different types of structures across the island? Speculative interpretations occasionally emerge, as they do with many prehistoric monuments. Some suggest astronomical alignments, proposing that the Naveta may have been oriented toward specific celestial events, such as solstices or lunar cycles. Others propose symbolic interpretations tied to water, navigation, or cosmological journeys. While these ideas remain unproven, they reflect the enduring human impulse to find meaning in architectural form. Even the surrounding environment adds layers to the mystery. Today, Naveta des Tudons sits in a relatively open landscape, but in the Bronze Age, the vegetation, climate, and settlement patterns may have been different. Was the monument originally more isolated, standing as a visible landmark across the terrain? Or was it integrated into a broader inhabited landscape, surrounded by dwellings, fields, and ritual spaces that have since disappeared? One of the most striking aspects of the Naveta is its preservation. Unlike many prehistoric structures that exist only as ruins or foundations, this monument still stands almost fully intact. Its survival raises questions about continuity and abandonment. Why was it not dismantled, reused, or destroyed over the centuries? Did later cultures recognize its significance, or did it simply fall out of use and remain untouched by chance? The structure also invites reflection on perception. To modern observers, it is easy to see the resemblance to a ship and to interpret it symbolically. But for its builders, the meaning may have been entirely different. The shape may have been functional, structural, or derived from entirely practical constraints. This gap between modern interpretation and ancient intention is one of the central challenges in archaeology. Inside its stone chambers, time feels compressed. The weight of limestone above, the narrowness of the space, and the quiet stillness create an atmosphere that is difficult to articulate. It is not merely a tomb. It is a constructed environment designed to hold both physical remains and cultural meaning. But what kind of meaning? And why does that meaning feel just out of reach? Perhaps the most enduring mystery of the Naveta des Tudons is not its shape, its contents, or even its construction, but its silence. It does not explain itself. It does not offer inscriptions or narratives. It simply exists, carrying within its walls traces of lives, deaths, and rituals that are only partially recoverable. As the Mediterranean wind moves across Minorca, brushing against the ancient stones, the Naveta remains unchanged, anchored between earth and imagination. It stands as both a monument and a question, a structure that invites interpretation but never confirms it. And so we are left wondering, was the Naveta des Tudons meant to guide the dead across a symbolic journey? Or is that simply the story we have chosen to see within its form? What beliefs shaped its creation, and what truths have been lost in the long silence of its stone chambers? And how many other structures like it remain across the islands and coastlines of the ancient world, waiting, still, to be understood? Continuing our journey from the sun-bleached stones of the Naveta des Tudons, where silence and stone seem inseparable, we now turn to a site whose very name evokes defiance, isolation, and the stark majesty of the desert, the fortress of Masada. Perched high on a plateau above the shimmering waters of the Dead Sea in what is today Palestine, Masada rises like a natural citadel, both a sentinel over the barren landscape and a monument to human endurance and ingenuity. From a distance, the fortress appears almost sculpted from the cliff itself. The plateau, a flat-topped mesa jutting roughly 400 meters above the surrounding desert, presents sheer cliffs on all sides, a natural barrier against intruders. The ascent seems impossible from afar, yet centuries ago, skilled engineers and determined builders transformed this inhospitable rock into a sprawling complex of walls, palaces, storerooms, and cisterns. The juxtaposition of human construction against the raw force of nature is striking. Masada is not merely a fortress. It is a declaration, a bold statement of survival carved into the unforgiving landscape. Archaeologists date the earliest constructions on Masada to the 1st century BC, during the reign of Herod the Great, the Roman-appointed king of Judea. Herod, known for his ambitious architectural projects, turned the plateau into a palatial retreat, a private fortress of stone, complete with royal palaces, bathhouses, storerooms, and complex water systems. Ingenious cisterns collected and stored rainwater, allowing inhabitants to survive prolonged sieges in an environment otherwise too arid to sustain life. One cannot help but marvel at the ingenuity required. Stone terraces clinging to cliffs, fortified walls hugging the natural edges of the plateau, and cisterns carved deep into rock, every detail meticulously planned to harness nature while defying it. Yet it is not Herod's opulent palaces that cast the longest shadow across history. It is the events of 73 to 74 A.D., when a small group of Jewish rebels, known as the Sicarii, made Masada their last stronghold during the First Jewish-Roman War. According to the historian Josephus, the fortress became a site of desperation and tragedy. A Roman legion laid siege, constructing massive ramps and fortifications in an attempt to breach the impregnable plateau. For months, the rebels held their ground, defying one of the most powerful military machines of the ancient world. And yet, when defeat seemed inevitable, the Sicarii chose to end their lives rather than surrender, a haunting decision immortalized in historical accounts, though still debated by modern scholars. The story itself presents a paradox. How could such a small group hold out for so long against a Roman legion, a force trained in siege warfare and renowned for its strategic prowess. The remains of Roman camps and siege ramps provide partial answers, but much remains unexplained. The surviving structures of Masada reveal sophisticated fortifications, yet they also suggest improvisation, adaptation, and resilience. Did the rebels anticipate every contingency, or were their defenses supplemented by sheer determination and intimate knowledge of the terrain? How did the narrow escape routes, hidden storerooms, and complex water systems factor into the prolonged resistance? Masada's architecture continues to fascinate. The Western Palace, perched on the cliff's edge, is a masterpiece of design. Terraces rise in layers, creating multi-level structures that harmonize with the plateau's natural contours. Walls are built from dressed stone, and the palace included elaborate frescoes, mosaic floors, and baths heated by hypocaust systems, a level of sophistication that suggests both luxury and strategic foresight. How did such architectural elegance coexist with a fortress designed to endure war? Was the palace intended more as a symbol of power, or did it serve practical purposes, ensuring that inhabitants could live comfortably while preparing for a siege? Even beyond Herod's constructions, Masada has left its mark on the landscape. Hundreds of storerooms carved into rock contain fragments of pottery, tools, and personal items, offering tantalizing glimpses of everyday life. These artifacts reveal a culture striving for normalcy amid extraordinary circumstances. Yet the sheer scale of the cisterns and storage spaces raises further questions. How were these water systems maintained? And how did the inhabitants ration resources over months of isolation? Could these logistical challenges explain why Masada was ultimately abandoned, even without direct assault? The fortress's natural setting adds an additional layer of enigma. Masada rises above the Dead Sea, a region already steeped in historical and geological peculiarities. The salt-encrusted shores and mineral-rich waters of the Dead Sea create a surreal backdrop for a human drama of survival and defiance. How did the starkness of the environment shape the cultural and psychological mindset of those who occupied the fortress? Did the harsh desert intensify their sense of isolation, or did it serve as a protective buffer, heightening their confidence in the plateau's natural defenses? The Roman siege ramp, still visible today, evokes both awe and speculation. Constructed of stone and earth, the ramp climbs the western edge of the plateau, forming a gradual incline that allowed the Romans to transport battering rams and siege engines. The technical expertise and labor required to build such a ramp in an environment so hostile to human endurance is staggering. How many laborers were involved? Were local populations compelled to work on the construction, or did the Romans rely solely on their soldiers? And once completed, did the ramp reflect an engineering triumph, or simply the inexorable march of a military juggernaut over human ingenuity? Masada's significance extends beyond its historical and architectural dimensions. For centuries, it has served as a symbol of resistance, courage, and the tension between freedom and oppression. Visitors often remark on the eerie silence that envelops the plateau, the way wind scours the flat stone surfaces, and the way the fortress seems almost suspended in time. It is a place where human ambition and natural forces intersect, where the faint echoes of the past resist interpretation, and where the line between legend and fact blurs. Even the human remains discovered at the site, while scarce, are the subject of intense study and debate. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of skeletons and bones that hint at the demographics of the rebel group. Yet the exact number of people who perished during the siege, the identities of the leaders, and the details of daily life remain elusive. How many stories have been lost to the desert wind, and how many lie hidden beneath layers of stone and sediment, waiting for discovery? Speculative theories occasionally emerge around Masada. Some propose that secret tunnels, yet to be uncovered, may exist within the plateau, connecting storage chambers or even extending to hidden escape routes. Others suggest that astronomical alignments could have influenced the placement of certain structures, though evidence remains inconclusive. The fortress's silhouette against the desert horizon raises questions about visibility, signaling, and communication. How did inhabitants signal to distant allies, if at all? Was the fortress a defensive refuge alone, or part of a broader network of settlements and watchpoints in the Judean desert? Perhaps most striking is the psychological dimension of Masada. Standing on the plateau today, one can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the tension of a small group holding out against overwhelming odds, the anticipation of the final moment, and the interplay between human ingenuity and the relentlessness of time. The fortress itself seems to ask questions that have no simple answers. How far can human resolve extend when faced with inevitable defeat? What motivates people to endure, to resist, and, ultimately, to choose their fate? And so, Masada remains not only a monument of stone, but a repository of questions. Its walls do not speak. They suggest, hint, and preserve fragments of a story that is partly historical, partly legendary. We can study its architecture, analyze its artifacts, and reconstruct its history from written accounts. Yet the fortress retains an aura of mystery, inviting reflection on human courage, ingenuity, and the choices that define civilizations. As the sun sets over the Judean desert, casting long shadows across the plateau and turning the limestone cliffs a glowing gold, one cannot help but wonder, what truths lie still hidden in the fortress's stone chambers? What details of the siege, the lives of those who lived there, and the beliefs that guided them are yet to be discovered? And how does Masada continue to speak to us, not just as a historical site, but as a timeless meditation on survival, resistance, and the enigmatic intersection of human endeavor and the natural world? Continuing our exploration from the sun-bleached stones of Masada, where human ingenuity met the harsh desert in a dramatic stand against time and tide, we now journey across the continent to a landscape that seems almost designed to perplex, the Carnac Alignments in Brittany, France. Unlike the isolated grandeur of a desert fortress, Karnak sprawls across gentle fields and rolling hills, a place where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and where rows of stones, standing in meticulous arrangement, defy easy explanation. The sheer scale of the site immediately captivates. Over 3,000 megalithic stones, some towering over 4 meters, stretch across kilometers of terrain in seemingly precise sequences. At first glance, they appear almost haphazard, yet the patterning suggests careful planning, a design that must have had meaning to the people who erected them thousands of years ago. Archaeologists date the earliest stones at Karnak to around 4,500 BC, placing them firmly in the Neolithic period. The people of this time were skilled farmers and craftspeople, yet the effort required to transport, shape, and erect these massive stones suggests a societal organization far beyond subsistence living. Were these stones the work of a centralized authority, a tribal confederation, or a collective effort driven by shared religious or astronomical beliefs? The answer remains elusive, as no definitive written records accompany the alignments, leaving us to piece together the purpose from the stones themselves and the traces of the people who once inhabited the surrounding areas. The layout of the alignments is both mesmerizing and puzzling. Some rows extend for more than a kilometer, while other groupings form concentric circles, squares, or irregular patterns. Certain stones appear to align with solar or lunar events, while others seem to mark celestial phenomena whose significance is now lost. Could the Karnak builders have been observing the heavens with an accuracy comparable to later civilizations such as the Egyptians or Mesopotamians? Or are we projecting modern interpretations onto a system whose meaning was fundamentally different, rooted in ritual, myth, or landscape-based cosmology rather than strict astronomy? These questions continue to inspire debates among scholars, with no consensus yet in sight. The stones themselves tell a story of human ambition and determination. Crafted from local granite and transported across challenging terrain, each megalith represents a monumental labor investment. Some stones weigh tens of tons, their smooth surfaces shaped and aligned with remarkable precision. How were these feats accomplished without metal tools or draft animals as we know them today? Experimental archaeology has attempted to replicate their methods using ropes, wooden sledges, and earthen ramps, but even these reconstructions highlight the extraordinary coordination and effort required. Could there have been specialized labor groups, or were entire communities mobilized for seasonal rituals? The scale of planning implies a sophisticated understanding of logistics, social hierarchy, and possibly spiritual or ceremonial imperatives. Despite extensive archaeological surveys, much about Karnak remains enigmatic. Excavations around the stones have revealed traces of Neolithic dwellings, pottery fragments, and burial sites, hinting at a culture that integrated megalithic construction with daily life, death, and ritual. Yet the alignments themselves seem deliberately monumental, intended to endure and impress. Some researchers suggest they were processional avenues, guiding participants in ceremonial journeys across the landscape. Others propose that the stones functioned as territorial markers, delineating sacred or communal spaces. Could the alignments have served multiple purposes, combining astronomy, religion, and social organization into a single monumental statement? The absence of definitive records leaves these hypotheses tantalizingly open. Adding to the mystery are patterns that suggest intentional geometrical designs. In some sectors, stones appear arranged in repeating intervals, with alignments converging on particular axes. Could these patterns encode numerical systems, calendrical knowledge, or spiritual symbolism lost to history? Fragments of oral traditions, later recorded in folklore, hint at prehistoric beliefs connecting the stones to celestial forces, ancestral spirits, or even protective energies. Yet separating myth from historical fact is challenging, leaving Karnak suspended between scientific inquiry and the imagination. The surrounding landscape enhances the sense of mystery. The rolling hills, wooded glades, and rivers of Brittany offer a natural stage for the stones, their placement seemingly harmonized with the environment. Some stones occupy elevated positions, offering commanding views of the horizon, while others nestle in valleys, their presence subtle yet deliberate. Could the builders have been guiding not just human perception, but also a symbolic interaction with the land itself? And if so, what cosmological, religious, or practical concerns dictated these choices? The interplay of terrain, stone, and potential ritual activity suggests a level of intentionality that continues to baffle researchers. Over centuries, the Karnak alignments have endured, weathering millennia of climate change, human activity, and natural erosion. Yet their very survival raises questions. How did these stones escape repurposing or destruction in a region that saw waves of migration, conquest, and agricultural expansion? Did later communities recognize their significance, preserving them through reverence, superstition, or a combination of both? This ongoing survival adds another layer to their enigma, suggesting a continuity of respect or fear that transcends ordinary explanation. Modern studies have employed advanced techniques, LiDAR scanning, geophysical surveys, and drone photography, to map the alignments with unprecedented precision. These analyses reveal previously unseen features, subtle depressions, stone sockets, and patterns invisible to the naked eye. Could these hidden markers indicate phases of construction, ceremonial pathways, or even previously unknown astronomical alignments? Each discovery deepens the mystery rather than resolving it, suggesting that Karnak's full purpose may remain forever just beyond reach. Speculative theories abound, ranging from the plausible to the fringe. Some suggest the stones were part of an ancient observatory or calendar system, while others propose connections to Atlantis, extraterrestrial guidance, or lost civilizations with knowledge beyond what we attribute to Neolithic societies. While mainstream archaeology does not endorse these theories, the persistence of speculation reflects a human desire to understand the incomprehensible, a desire sparked precisely by sites like Karnak, where the visible and the invisible, the material and the symbolic, intersect so profoundly. The alignments also carry a deeply human resonance. Standing among the rows, one senses the rhythm of the builder's labor, the passage of countless generations, and the silent dialogue between humans and the land. Each stone is a testament to effort, belief, and imagination, yet it also challenges us to interpret meaning from the mere presence of these massive markers. What stories did the Neolithic people tell around these stones? What ceremonies, journeys, or contemplations did they inspire? We may never know, but the questions themselves are part of the experience, drawing the modern observer into a relationship with the past. Even the light at Karnak seems to animate the site with a sense of mystery. The morning sun casts long shadows along the rows, highlighting the precision of their placement, while the evening light softens the contours, making some stones appear to float above the ground. The alignment of celestial bodies, the shadows of the stones, and the rhythm of the landscape all combine to create an atmosphere that is both contemplative and unsettling, a reminder that these constructions were more than utilitarian. They were, in some way, expressions of human wonder, reverence, and perhaps even fear. And so, the Carnac Alignments endure as a monumental question. Each stone, each row, each subtle shift in placement is a fragment of a story we may never fully reconstruct. How much knowledge about the heavens, the seasons, the human condition, and the sacred have been encoded in these silent stones? How did these ancient builders conceive of their world, and what were they hoping to communicate across time? As we walk among the alignments today, tracing their lines with our eyes and footsteps, we are reminded that history is not only about facts and dates, but also about mysteries, enigmas deliberately left in stone, waiting for us to wonder, reflect, and imagine what might still be hidden beneath the earth and within the minds of those who first stood here. Leaving behind the wind-swept symmetry of the Carnac Alignments, where ancient stones stretch across the Breton landscape like a frozen language no longer fully readable, our journey now turns south and east once more, across the Mediterranean and into the fertile corridor of the Nile Valley. Here, near the ancient city of Akhmim in Upper Egypt, lies a tomb that does not simply preserve the dead, but seems to preserve a moment of transformation in Egyptian thought itself, the tomb of Petosiris. At first approach, the site appears modest compared to the monumental pyramids and temple complexes that dominate the Egyptian imagination. Yet its quiet exterior conceals a striking interior world, one where artistic styles, religious ideas, and cultural identities overlap in ways that continue to challenge clear interpretation. The tomb belongs to Petosiris, a high priest of Thoth at Hermopolis, who lived during a turbulent transitional period around the late 4th century BC, when Egypt stood at the crossroads of Persian withdrawal, Greek influence, and internal cultural redefinition. The tomb is not carved into isolation like many royal burials, but built and decorated as a hybrid structure, blending traditional Egyptian funerary architecture with stylistic elements that hint at broader Mediterranean influence. From the outside, it resembles a temple more than a tomb, its limestone facade carefully structured, its entrance framed with reliefs and inscriptions that present Petosiris not merely as a deceased individual, but as a figure embedded in cosmic and religious order. Stepping inside, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The walls of the inner chambers are covered with detailed reliefs, scenes depicting agricultural life, ritual processions, offerings to gods, and the journey of the soul into the afterlife. Yet what makes the tomb of Petosiris particularly intriguing is not only its iconography, but the stylistic duality that runs through it. Some scenes are rendered in a distinctly classical Egyptian style, rigid, symbolic, highly formalized. Others, however, display softer modeling, more naturalistic proportions, and a subtle shift in artistic perspective that reflects influences emerging from the wider Hellenistic world. This coexistence of visual languages raises an immediate question. What kind of cultural environment produces such deliberate hybridity? Was this a conscious attempt to bridge traditions, or the visual expression of a society in transition? One neither fully ancient Egyptian in the Old Kingdom sense, nor fully Greek in the emerging Hellenistic mode? Petosiris himself is a central figure in this puzzle. As high priest of Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and lunar cycles, he occupied a role deeply embedded in intellectual and religious authority. His tomb presents him not only as a religious leader, but as a mediator between worlds, between life and death, order and change, tradition and transformation. Some inscriptions emphasize his piety and service to the gods, while others highlight his civic and moral virtues in ways that feel surprisingly personal compared to earlier funerary texts. This personalization is unusual. Earlier Egyptian tombs often focus on standardized formulas for ensuring safe passage into the afterlife. But here, the individuality of Petosiris seems to emerge more strongly, almost as if the concept of personal legacy is beginning to take shape in a new form. Was this a reflection of shifting religious beliefs, or the influence of foreign artistic and philosophical traditions entering Egypt during this period? The architectural layout of the tomb itself reinforces this sense of transition. The structure is divided into distinct sections, including an outer courtyard, an offering hall, and inner burial chambers. Each space is carefully aligned, guiding visitors through a controlled progression of movement and meaning. The reliefs along these walls are not random decorations. They form a narrative sequence, almost like a visual text, leading the observer through themes of life, moral order, and cosmic renewal. Yet even this structured narrative raises deeper questions. Some scenes depict agricultural abundance in striking detail, plowing fields, harvesting grain, and transporting goods, suggesting an idealized vision of eternal prosperity. Others show ritual purification and divine judgment, reinforcing the traditional Egyptian belief in moral accountability after death. But in certain areas, the blending of styles introduces ambiguity. Gods are rendered with subtle variations, human figures appear more individualized, and spatial arrangements feel less rigid than earlier dynastic art. Was this artistic evolution intentional, or the result of multiple workshops with different training backgrounds contributing to a single monumental project? Or does it reflect something more profound, a society negotiating its own identity at a moment of historical uncertainty? The period in which Petosiris lived was marked by significant political change. The waning influence of native Egyptian dynasties and the increasing presence of foreign powers created a complex cultural landscape. Yet rather than erasing tradition, this period appears to have generated synthesis. The tomb stands as physical evidence of this process, where continuity and adaptation coexist within the same stone walls. Some scholars interpret the tomb of Petosiris as a deliberate statement of cultural resilience. By integrating foreign stylistic elements into a fundamentally Egyptian religious framework, it may have served as an assertion that Egyptian spiritual identity could endure even as political realities shifted. In this reading, the tomb becomes not just a burial place, but a philosophical declaration carved into limestone. Others suggest a more fluid interpretation, that the tomb reflects genuine cultural hybridity, where boundaries between traditions were not rigid, but permeable. In this view, Petosiris and his artisans were not consciously merging two separate worlds, but living within a single, evolving one, where ideas, aesthetics, and beliefs naturally intersected. Yet even these interpretations leave unresolved tensions. Why does the artistic shift appear uneven, almost experimental in places? Why do some sections adhere strictly to older conventions, while others depart from them? And what does this tell us about the people who created these images, not only their beliefs about death, but their understanding of change itself? The inscriptions within the tomb add another layer of complexity. Written in hieroglyphic script, they invoke traditional Egyptian deities and funerary formulas, yet also include phrasing that feels unusually reflective. Petosiris is described not only in terms of ritual roles, but in terms of character and wisdom, suggesting an evolving conception of individuality within religious context. Could this indicate a broader intellectual shift in late-period Egyptian thought? Or is it a localized expression unique to Hermopolitan tradition? Even the preservation of the tomb contributes to its mystery. Unlike many ancient sites that suffered extensive destruction or reuse, the tomb of Petosiris survived in relatively intact condition, allowing modern scholars to study its iconography in detail. Yet its very completeness can be deceptive. What we see is only what survived. What was not removed, altered, or lost to time. What portions of its original meaning may have vanished with colors faded, pigments eroded, or inscriptions damaged? The surrounding necropolis adds further context, but not clarity. Other tombs in the region follow more conventional designs, making Petosiris's monument stand out even more sharply. Was this distinction intentional, a statement of individuality or status, or simply a reflection of evolving artistic trends concentrated in a particular workshop or intellectual circle? Standing within the tomb today, one experiences a peculiar sensation, a sense of ordered transition, as if the architecture itself is guiding thought from one conceptual space to another. The interplay of shadow and relief, text and image, tradition and innovation, creates an environment that feels less like a static burial chamber and more like a structured meditation on existence. And yet, for all its detail, the tomb remains silent about its most fundamental questions. What did Petosiris and his contemporaries truly believe about the boundary between life and death during this transitional period? How did they reconcile inherited tradition with emerging influences? And was this tomb intended as a personal statement, a religious necessity, or something even more complex, a bridge between eras, encoded in stone? As we step back from the decorated walls and exit into the light of Upper Egypt, the contrast is striking. Outside, the landscape is continuous, open, and timeless. Inside, it is segmented into narrative, symbol, and meaning. Between these two worlds lies the tomb of Petosiris, a place where history does not resolve itself, but quietly unfolds into ambiguity. And so the question remains, as persistent as the carvings etched into its walls: how much of what we see here reflects belief? How much reflects transition? And how much reflects a world of thought that has no direct equivalent in our own understanding today? Flowing gently from the mysterious iconography of the tomb of Petosiris in Upper Egypt, we now turn our gaze northwest, across seas and centuries, to the dense forests of central France. Here, amidst the undulating fields and wooded hills of the Dordogne region, lies a monument both simple in construction and profound in implication: the Dolmen de Briande. Unlike the grandeur of pyramids or temple complexes, the Dolmen de Briande is unassuming at first glance, a low, weathered stone structure nestled quietly in its natural surroundings, yet brimming with enigmas that have puzzled archaeologists for decades. From a distance, the dolmen appears as a humble collection of massive stones, carefully arranged in a deliberate, almost ritualistic formation. Two upright megaliths support a horizontal capstone, forming a chamber that seems at once protective and secretive. Moss and lichen cling to its surfaces, softening its edges and merging the structure with the surrounding woodland, as though nature herself is slowly reclaiming this ancient threshold. The air here is thick with quiet, birdsong punctuated by the occasional rustle of leaves, and yet the silence feels charged, as if the stones themselves are keeping a memory just out of reach. Archaeological investigations date the dolmen to approximately 4000 to 3000 BC, placing it squarely within the European Neolithic. This was a period of profound transformation. Communities were moving from nomadic lifestyles to settled farming. Social hierarchies were emerging, and ritual practices surrounding life, death, and the natural world were becoming increasingly codified. Yet, despite this broad understanding, the precise purpose of the Dolmen de Briande remains elusive. Was it primarily a tomb, a ceremonial site, or something altogether different? A marker of territory, a celestial observatory, or even a place of communal gatherings whose memory has long since faded from human consciousness? The interior of the dolmen, though modest, invites closer contemplation. Archaeologists have found traces of human remains, along with fragments of pottery and flint tools, suggesting ritualized interment. But the layout defies easy categorization. Unlike later monumental tombs with clearly defined corridors and chambers, the Dolmen de Briande is intimate, almost personal in scale. Standing within its chamber, one is immediately struck by the sense of enclosure, the quiet intimacy that the builders must have intended. Was this meant for a single revered individual, or for successive generations, each carefully placed within the sheltering stones? Even more intriguing are the dolmen's alignments. Like many megalithic structures across Europe, there are hints that its placement is not random. Scholars have noted possible solar or lunar alignments, with the rising sun or certain phases of the moon casting light into the chamber at specific times of year. Could this indicate an awareness of astronomical cycles, or was it symbolic, connecting the deceased with the rhythms of the cosmos? The exact precision and purpose remain open questions, inviting both careful scientific investigation and the imagination to wander through the shadows of prehistory. The dolmen's simplicity, paradoxically, is its most enigmatic feature. The stones themselves are massive, yet devoid of decorative carvings or inscriptions. Unlike the nearby Carnac Alignments, where stones were meticulously arranged in sweeping rows, here there is no overt message etched in stone. This silence leaves us to wonder. Did the builders intend to communicate through absence, through spatial arrangement, or through ritual action that has long been lost to time? And what beliefs must have guided them to select, transport, and erect these stones, sometimes weighing several tons, with such determination and precision? Over time, the Dolmen de Briande has been subject to natural forces and human interference alike. Centuries of weathering have smoothed its surfaces, soil and vegetation have shifted around its base, and yet, despite these changes, the structure endures, stubbornly upright against the passage of millennia. Early antiquarians recorded its presence, sometimes embellishing local legends of spirits, guardians, and hidden treasures, blending fact with folklore in ways that both enrich and complicate our understanding. Modern archaeological practice, while more disciplined, continues to wrestle with the same essential questions. Why here, and why in this way? Speculative theories abound, reflecting the human desire to make sense of structures whose original meanings are obscured. Some propose that dolmens like this were centers for ancestor worship, reinforcing social cohesion through shared ritual. Others suggest a cosmological function, a bridge between the earthly and the celestial, a way for the living to engage with cycles of time that governed the natural world. A few researchers even entertain more controversial ideas. Could such sites have served as early centers of healing, or as nodes in a network of spiritual geography that connected distant communities across the landscape? While none of these interpretations can be confirmed, each adds a layer of mystery that deepens our engagement with the site. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Dolmen de Briande is the sense of continuity it evokes. Though thousands of years have passed, one can almost imagine the rhythms of Neolithic life that brought people here. The careful transport of stones from nearby quarries, the collective labor of a community invested in a shared vision, the ceremonial rites performed in the flickering light of fire, the placement of the dead beneath the capstone, and the silent watching of the sun, moon, and stars across generations. Each act, though long vanished, seems to echo faintly in the stillness that surrounds the stones today. Yet for all we have uncovered, profound questions remain. How did the builders of the Dolmen de Briande perceive life and death, the seen and the unseen? What knowledge guided their hands as they selected and erected these massive stones? And what stories, now lost, were told within the shadow of this chamber as the living connected with the departed? The dolmen offers no answers, only the enduring presence of human intention etched in stone, challenging us to imagine a world at once alien and intimately connected to our own. As we step back from the stones, taking in the forested slopes and open sky that surround this remarkable site, one cannot help but feel a sense of reverence. The Dolmen de Briande is not merely a relic of the past. It is a threshold to inquiry, a silent interlocutor inviting us to ponder the lives, beliefs, and mysteries of those who came before. And in that quiet reflection, we are reminded that some questions, like the precise purpose and meaning of this enigmatic dolmen, may never be fully answered, leaving space for wonder, contemplation, and the enduring allure of the unknown. Flowing from the quiet mystery of the Dolmen de Briande, where massive stones whispered of human devotion and ancient ritual, we now journey southeast to the rugged landscapes of Sicily, Italy. Here, carved into the steep limestone gorges and overlooking the verdant valleys, lies the Necropolis of Pantalica, one of the Mediterranean's most enigmatic and awe-inspiring burial complexes. Unlike the simple dolmens of France, Pantalica sprawls across cliffs and ravines, a labyrinth of tombs and rock-cut chambers that speaks of a civilization both sophisticated and shadowed in mystery. From afar, the necropolis appears almost suspended between earth and sky. The jagged limestone cliffs rise abruptly from the Anapo River, their sheer faces punctuated by hundreds of carved cavities, ancient tombs hewn directly into stone. These chamber tombs, numbering over 5,000 in various estimates, vary in size and form, some barely large enough to hold a single body, others spacious enough for multiple burials. The sight is simultaneously solemn and humbling, a landscape sculpted as much by human hands as by natural forces over millennia. Sunlight spills into the gullies at different angles throughout the day, illuminating portions of the cliffs while leaving others in deep shadow, creating a visual rhythm that feels intentional, almost ritualistic. Archaeologists date the primary occupation of Pantalica to between 1350 and 700 BC, during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age. The site is linked to the Cycles, an indigenous people whose origins and cultural practices remain partially shrouded in obscurity. While excavations have revealed pottery, tools, and occasional personal artifacts, the exact societal structure and spiritual beliefs of its inhabitants are largely inferred rather than documented. How, for instance, did they select which cliffs or rock faces would become tombs? Was placement dictated by family lineage, religious symbolism, or sheer practicality? The answers remain tantalizingly out of reach. What immediately captures the imagination is the sheer scale and organization of the necropolis. Unlike random rock shelters, the tombs of Pantalica appear clustered in distinct groups, often with a careful spatial rhythm that suggests planning and intent. Some clusters are set high above the river, others closer to water and arable land, hinting at possible hierarchical or functional distinctions. The tombs themselves are remarkably consistent in their construction, square or rectangular chambers, carved with laborious precision, accessed by steps or simple openings. Yet, subtle variations, slight differences in dimensions, orientations, or chamber depth, invite speculation. Could these differences signify social status, ancestral lineage, or symbolic meaning lost to time? Beyond the technical mastery, there is the question of symbolism. The alignment of certain tombs relative to the rising or setting sun, as noted by some researchers, suggests an awareness of astronomical phenomena. Could the necropolis have been designed to engage with solar cycles, marking solstices or equinoxes? If so, what role did such alignments play in the Sicels' conceptions of death, rebirth, or the afterlife? And might the act of carving into the living rock itself have held spiritual significance? An effort to anchor the deceased to the enduring earth, merging human memory with the permanence of stone? Despite its monumental nature, the necropolis of Pantalica retains an intimate human scale. Entering the tombs, one cannot help but feel the presence of the lives that passed through this landscape. The chambers, though austere, were designed to shelter, to preserve, and perhaps to honor. Skeletal remains indicate that individuals were laid to rest carefully, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, ceramics, small implements, and personal ornaments. Each artifact is a whisper from the past, offering hints of daily life, trade, and ritual, yet resisting any definitive narrative. What rituals accompanied these interments? Were the dead mourned collectively or individually? And how did the living interact with these silent sentinels of stone over successive generations? Over centuries, the site has endured natural and human forces alike. Earthquakes, erosion, and vegetation have reshaped the cliffs, occasionally obscuring or collapsing tombs, while early modern travelers and antiquarians documented Pantalica with varying accuracy, often blending observation with legend. One enduring puzzle is the sheer density of the tombs in certain areas, with hundreds clustered in tight proximity. How did a society of modest technological means achieve such intensive excavation on sheer rock faces? And why choose these precipitous locations, accessible only by perilous paths, rather than the more gentle terrain below? Some scholars suggest defense, spiritual elevation, or a symbolic closeness to the heavens as possible explanations, but none can be confirmed. Speculative theories further enrich the sense of mystery. Could Pantalica have served not only as a necropolis, but as a central hub for religious, economic, or political activities? Some researchers propose that its tombs acted as markers of territorial boundaries between cycle communities, while others imagine processional routes along the cliffs, where rituals of passage were enacted in the shadow of the river gorge. The interplay between the natural landscape and human intervention is striking. The Anapo River carves a deep channel through the limestone, and the tomb's proximity to water may suggest practical concerns, ritual purification, or symbolic resonance with life-giving elements. Yet the intentions of the builders remain tantalizingly obscure, leaving room for interpretation and wonder. Adding another layer to the enigma, Pantalica is not an isolated phenomenon. Across Sicily and the wider Mediterranean, similarly structured necropolises appear, each unique yet sharing conceptual motifs. What drove the cycles to select cliff faces rather than more conventional earth mounds? How did ideas, techniques, and cultural beliefs travel across these ancient communities, inspiring parallel yet distinctive forms of monumental burial? The questions point to a larger, interconnected prehistoric landscape, one in which human ingenuity, ritual, and reverence for the dead coalesced into enduring stone. As we walk along the narrow pathways that thread between the tombs, we are struck not just by scale, but by the profound silence that pervades the necropolis. The wind whispers through the ravines, Birds wheel above the cliffs. Sunlight filters into the rock-cut chambers, illuminating ancient dust and stone. In this stillness, the voices of the past seem almost audible, urging contemplation. What stories were shared among the living as they carved these chambers, placed the dead within, and traced the boundaries of their sacred space? How did successive generations perceive these tombs, and what rituals, now entirely lost, once infused this landscape with meaning? Ultimately, the Necropolis of Pantalica confronts us with the enduring paradox of archaeology. Immense knowledge exists in the form of stones, artifacts, and spatial patterns, yet the human experiences, emotions, and beliefs behind them remain partially veiled. Each tomb carved into the limestone cliff is a testament to skill, devotion, and cultural continuity, but it is also a silent question, a challenge to our imagination and scholarship. The necropolis stands as both a monument and a mystery, bridging millennia of human history and inviting us to ponder not only what we have discovered, but what remains forever elusive. As we step back, observing the necropolis from the surrounding ridges, the scale and complexity of Pantalica settle upon the imagination. Here is a place where life and death, labor and ritual, human aspiration and natural grandeur converge. And while archaeologists continue to excavate, measure, and interpret, much about Pantalica remains unresolved. What secrets linger in the shadowed chambers and along the precipitous cliffs? What knowledge, lost to time, might have guided the hands and hearts of those who carved these tombs? In the quiet contemplation of this ancient necropolis, we are reminded that some mysteries are meant not merely to be solved, but to inspire reflection, awe, and the endless curiosity that draws us into the depths of human history.